Hey guys, today we find ourselves on the vast Eurasian steppe, and you're not exactly having the coziest of evenings. Imagine being shaken awake not by an alarm clock, but by the rumble of hooves rolling closer and closer across the grasslands. That's right, you're about to be chased by Mongol horsemen. Not the sort of bedtime story you expected, but here we are, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this, but we'll give it our best try. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It keeps these sleepy, strange little adventures coming. And as always, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is, so drop a quick comment below. Now picture yourself lying there wrapped in whatever passed for a travel cloak in the 13th century, when suddenly the earth hums beneath you. The Mongols were famous for their horses, after all small, sturdy and able to gallop for days on end. Historical fact number 1, these animals could graze as they travelled, which made the Mongol army terrifyingly mobile. No need for a supply train when your mount is basically a four-legged food truck. Quirky tidbit. Some sources say Mongol riders drank horseblood on the march, making a quick cut in the jugular vein and sipping like an organic smoothie. Whether or not you're squeamish, you have to admire the portability. Imagine trying that with your Prius. And here's the scholarly debate historians still argue whether the thunder of hoofbeats was enough to strike terror, miles ahead of the horde, or if it's just a romantic exaggeration by chroniclers who wanted to spice up their manuscripts. You lying there in the dark don't have time to debate. The sound is real and it's closing in. You scramble upright, heart-racing breath fogging in the cool steppe night. The grass rustles and in the distance you swear you see lanterns bobbing, though Mongols didn't usually advertise their presence. Maybe it's just stars playing tricks on your eyes. Either way, staying put is not an option. And so your chase begins. But if the grasslands are this open, where exactly can you hide? That, my friend, is the problem we'll face in the next stretch of the journey. You crest a low rise and the steppe opens like an ocean of grass, every blade leaning in the same direction as if the wind were a general, and the meadow its obedient army. You crouch, then stand. There is nothing to crouch behind. No hedgerows, no boulders, not even a sulky tree. Only horizons. The sky feels huge enough to press your shoulders down, and the breeze combs past your ears with that dry, papery hiss that sounds like pages turning in a book you'd rather not read tonight. You try the oldest trick in the handbook of not getting caught, become small. Cloak-flattened knees bent, you slide sideways through the grass the way a guilty shadow might. The wind helps by stroking the stems in steady waves, its white noise hush telling your nerves to calm down. For a minute you almost believe you're invisible. Then a distant snort horse, definitely horse, reminds you you're not the only creature on this prairie. Mainstream fact whispered, so your heartbeat can keep time. Mongol armies melted across this landscape because they organized for speed-advanced scouts to map water relay riders to carry messages and spare mounts, so a warrior could switch horses before one even got properly tired. That's why the horizon isn't your friend. On this board they move 3 spaces while you move 1. A quirky tidbit sidles in some travellers carried tiny bone whistles not as alarms but as wind companions, trifles that sang with gusts for sanity's sake. You don't have one, but the air makes its own music through a fray in your waterskin strap, a thin note like a timid kettle. You kneel and pinch a tuft of grass testing the underbreeze. If riders are upwind, you might smell them sweat leather, the dairy tang of fermented mare's milk. Or you might smell nothing and imagine everything. Fear is the world's most talented perfumer. You pull your cloak tighter and begin a diagonal trot, the kind a shepherd uses when he doesn't want to alarm the flock or his knees. Scholarly debate you can almost hear in the footnotes. Did Mongol pursuit parties run prey until dawn, letting night do half the work, or did they rein back after a short test mark direction and wait for daylight to close the net? Some chronicles favour stamina hunts. Others describe patience punctuated by short rushes. You would love a consensus right now. You pause to listen. The steppe repeats itself, wind hush hiss, a faint tink far off, perhaps a buckle, perhaps a stirrup kissing a stone, perhaps your imagination tapping a spoon against your skull. You creep toward a shallow swale, where the grass grows a shade darker. Moisture means thicker cover. Another fact to anchor you: Mongols used quiet signals on patrol flags, hand signs, whistled codes adjusting on the fly, the way bike couriers thread traffic. Their communication was almost boring, which is precisely why it was terrifying. It's like being chased by an office memo that can gallop. You sip your waterskin and grimace at the warm, flat taste. The strap's fray sings again. You wedge it under your collar and the note dies. The silence is suddenly louder. The ground lifts in a long, lazy swell. You angle across it rather than cresting the high point. A silhouette on a ridge is a gift to anyone with eyes. Downslope an animal track appears a narrow lane glazed smooth by hooves over many seasons. You place your feet where the prints are densest, blending your passage with old traffic. Soft tidbits, some steppe nomads stitch tiny pockets of herbs inside collars. Sweet flag wormwood, wild thyme, part charm, part deodorant, portable sanctuary. You have no herbs, but you do have a threadbare loop of wool twined with horsehair, a lucky trinket a child traded you for a tin button. You rub it. It squeaks. You immediately wish it hadn't. The horizon keeps being the horizon. Nothing new appears, nothing useful changes. You count breaths in eights, and let your mind idle into that runner's half-dream. It's like working the graveyard shift literally, except the boss is a barometer, and the break room is everywhere. You need more than continue existing, so you borrow from hunting lore, make your path uninteresting. Straight lines are invitations, zigzags are riddles. You choose a slow riddle, drawing a gentle S between two low rises, careful never to frame a neat silhouette. Behind you a flick, a whisper, a fragment that might be a voice or wind recoiling from a clump of sedge. You stop, heart drumming, palm to soil. The earth is a patient historian, and its archive is open, a faint tremor, not yet a thunder, more like someone moving furniture in a house 3 doors down. Weigh the options. If you sprint, you win seconds and lose sense. If you wait, you win information and risk everything else. The wind, helpful as a board consultant, offers a memo: keep moving, make it boring. You resume the diagonal slower and lower, aiming for a smear of shadow that might be a shallow hollow. File that under hopeful geology. Another debate drifts across the grass. Did travellers ever flatten wide fans of grass to mimic the sign of a larger group the ghost herd, or is that just campfire inflation? Some ethnographers cite stories. Others roll their eyes. You test the idea by brushing your cloak along the stems, widening your passage, then immediately worry you've made yourself into a billboard. You stop doing that. The wind freshens, scalloping the sea of grass with a silver edge. You think of bells, how a distant herd used to carry music across a mile of air like a memory rolled thin. Tonight there are no bells, only the idea of them tiny and forgiving. Your stride steadies. You reach the shadow smear and discover with peppermint cool relief a shallow dip, more a shrug in the earth than a ditch. You slide into it and let the lip erase your outline. Cheek to ground, you listen with your bones. The tremor is clearer now. Not many horses. 2-3, your mind votes 0. Your ears veto with a firm 2.5. You lay a blade of grass across your wrist to watch how the breeze lifts one end and not the other. If you had a map, you'd fold it into a pillow. Instead, the old rules keep the wind on your cheek, the moon at your shoulder, and the horizon as your clock. Move when the tremor dips, not when it swells. Information snack before you go. Steppe riders travelled with coils of rawhide for emergency tack repairs. You, a pedestrian, repurpose a trailing thong on your belt into a sling for the water skin, so it doesn't thump your hip like a telltale drum. Your silhouette shrinks another ½ inch. You ease out of the depression and start the next leg slower, smoother, letting the wind sand the edges of your movement until even you might not notice you. The grass agrees to keep your secret for now. Far behind the horizon clears its throat, but the longest horizon hides the shortest surprise, and the next rise may hold something you did not plan for. You feel your lungs burning already, even though you've barely been running. The grass slaps at your shins, and the air tastes of dust and old sunlight, as if the steppe itself has been holding its breath for centuries. You're not a sprinter, never claimed to be, but tonight you're trying to outrun the hoofbeats of history. You clutch your water skin like it's a lifeline, bouncing against your hip, sloshing as if it knows you're wasting precious energy. In the distance, the faint thunder of horses grows fading, then swelling again like waves in a tide that doesn't care whether you float or sink. The steppe offers little mercy. A mainstream fact to ground you: the Mongol pony could trot nearly 70 miles in a day, carrying its rider across flat grasslands without complaint. That means your panicked dash, heroic as it feels, covers the kind of distance a Mongol courier might casually yawn through before breakfast. You run, you stumble, and the reality is sobering. You're not faster, you're just later. Quirky tidbit: some chroniclers note that Mongol messengers tied letters into little cloth pouches sewn under their saddles, like the medieval version of red receipts. If the messenger didn't arrive on time, well, let's just say nobody debated about missed delivery windows. And yet here you are, a human package without a horse, hoping no one bothers to sign for you. The grass parts for your legs, but resists to whispering shh, though it knows you'll give yourself away. Sweat beads on your brow, trickling down to sting your eyes. The strap of the water skin cuts into your shoulder, and you wonder if discarding it would make you faster. But water is survival. Without it, you're done in hours. It's like running late for a graveyard shift. You don't want to go, but you can't afford not to show up. Historians still argue about Mongol pursuit methods. Some say small teams were dispatched specifically to harass and exhaust a fleeing enemy, never killing outright, just herding them like sheep. Others claim the Mongols preferred efficiency, capture quickly, interrogate, move on. Tonight you can't help but feel like a sheep nudged towards some invisible corral. And maybe that's worse, the idea that your escape isn't random, but choreographed part of a game you don't even understand. Your feet pound harder, the earth sending little tremors up your legs. You realize you're not sprinting anymore, but bounding clumsily like a rabbit, desperate and graceless. The sound of hoofbeats drifts again, not right behind, but not gone either, hovering in your ears like a threat and a promise. You clutch the water skin tighter as though its leaking seams were the only tether to sanity. Then up ahead, a shape, a silhouette against the lowering sky. Wooden slats, a crooked wheel, broken planks scattered like ribs. A trader's cart, abandoned and tipped sideways, half swallowed by the grass. Relief punches through your chest. Shelter. Food, maybe. You lunge toward it, nearly falling in your eagerness, already imagining crusts of bread or a forgotten pouch of dried apricots. The kind of treasure that could turn a chase into a journey. But you don't know yet what waits inside the wreck. Supplies, a trap, or just another disappointment as empty as your legs already feel. The steppe doesn't care, but you're about to find out. You stagger toward the cart like a parched pilgrim toward a fountain, your knees aching from uneven earth, your chest rattling with every breath. The thing looks almost theatrical, one wheel propped awkwardly against the body, its tongue jutting like a broken limb, the grass already reclaiming the edges. If it weren't for the faint whiff of dust and horse leather, you'd think it had been abandoned a century ago. Still, desperate eyes see opportunity in splinters. You crouch low, pressing your ear against the sideboard. No sound except the wind teasing through the cracked slats. Carefully you push your head into the shadowed belly of the cart. Inside are scraps of canvas, a tangle of rope, and glorious discovery, a few shriveled apples brown at the edges but still recognizably food. You pocket them like jewels, though your stomach warns you not to celebrate too soon. Spoiled fruit can betray you faster than Mongol horsemen. Mainstream fact to steady your nerves, steppe traders often moved in small caravans, pulling carts laden with salt furs or grain. But Mongol raids made these journeys perilous, and many merchants abandoned their loads when chased, hoping lightened steppes might spare their lives. Some carts were never reclaimed, standing like ghost monuments on the prairie. You've just found one of those monuments, an accidental museum exhibit with your fingerprints now all over it. A quirky tidbit slips in. Some accounts suggest travellers tucked charms under cartwheels, little carved wooden horses, bronze coins, even knotted cords meant to ensure safe passage. You fumble under the broken axle, and astonishingly your fingers brush a hardened lump of twine and bead worn smooth by time. Is it superstition, or just litter? Hard to say, but tonight it feels like an omen that refuses to leave your palm. Historians still argue about how Mongols treated abandoned goods. Some claim they scooped up everything, adding foreign luxuries to their already eclectic collections. Others suggest that carts were beneath notice, too slow and too fragile to matter in a world of hooves. But one theory nags at you. Sometimes they left carts untouched as bait, knowing desperate fugitives might be drawn to them. You glance around uneasily, the thought sitting heavier than the apples in your pocket. The steppe wind returns, rustling louder now, a hiss that reminds you of ocean surf, though no sea lies within 1,000 miles. The sound rises and falls like breathing, and you can't decide whether the land itself is exhaling or whether horses are truly drawing near. The air tastes metallic, as though storms are brewing somewhere beyond sight. You shift to the far side of the cart, trying to judge whether it can serve as cover. It's laughable, really, planks and canvas against mounted archers. Still, in this barren expanse, even illusion feels like strategy. You tug the rope coil free and sling it across your shoulder. Rope is always useful. Rope is also heavy, but tonight you hoard burdens like a miser. For a moment, your body insists on stillness. You slide down back against the wheel and let your eyes drift upward. The sky sprawls with stars, millions more than city eyes ever count. They stare coldly back, unmoved by your panic. Steppe nomads once navigated by those very constellations, tracing ancestral stories in their shimmer. You meanwhile are trying to stitch together a map of survival from breath and heartbeat alone. The apples call. You bite one cautious, the flavour sour, sweet, gritty as sand. It's food, real food, but it feels like a loud declaration to your stomach and to anyone listening. Every chew is thunder in your head. You swallow quickly, half choking, and decide to save the rest. Better to gnaw later when the danger feels less immediate. The silence deepens, then cracks, faint whistles, high-pitched, distant yet purposeful. They rise, fall, and fade like bird calls, but too regular to be random. Mongol signals, very possibly. Chroniclers describe whistled codes used to guide formations in darkness, simple phrases carried on the wind. You hold your breath trying to decode them, but all you hear is your pulse drumming frantic counterpoint. Your mind races with absurd comparisons. This whole ordeal is like being in a night shift at some endless open-air warehouse, except the shelves are grass, the clerks ride horses, and the only product is terror. The absurdity almost makes you laugh, but you bite it back. Sound is a luxury you can't afford. You know you must move again. The cart is a temporary pause, not a sanctuary. To stay is to risk being found. To go is to risk being seen. Both feel equally unkind. The rope presses against your shoulder, the apples weigh on your hip, and the night itself feels like it has noticed you. Then soft as dew comes the sound of hooves. Not thundering, not near, but close enough that the earth hums with their rhythm. You freeze skin, prickling ears, straining certain that any movement will betray you. The cart creaks faintly as the wind nudges it, disguising or amplifying your breathing. Are they passing? Are they circling? The grass tells you nothing, only hisses and bends like an audience too polite to intervene. You grip the charm you found under the axle thumb, worrying the bead. Maybe it's a talisman, maybe it's just broken string, but tonight you are willing to believe in both. The hooves pause, then shift again. The steppe feels crowded with possibilities. You can stay crouched behind this skeleton of wood, praying the night consumes you, or you can rise, gamble your life on speed and hope the stars don't witness your fall. The cart has given you apples and rope, but it offers no certainty, and certainty is what you crave most, even more than water. But the steppe doesn't deal in certainty, only in choices, and the choice you make next could determine whether those hoofbeats fade or grow louder still. The wind makes your decision for you. It slides around the cart and through your cloak with the confidence of a seasoned auditor, finding every gap in your argument for staying put. It isn't cruel exactly, just thorough. It whispers in the grass like a librarian shushing the entire steppe, and you realise that if anything can cover your sound, it's this steady breath of the world. You ease up from the wheel's shadow, straighten carefully and let the breeze lay its cool palm against your cheek. Keep the wind on your face, you tell yourself. Hunters do this to keep their scent from running ahead like a gossip. Tonight you are your own nervous deer, and the wind is the only etiquette that matters. You move slowly at first, testing each footfall. The grass is a chorus, and you want to be a backing vocalist at most. The breeze helps tugging the stems just as you pass, so your footsteps hide inside their rustle. It stings your eyes, though, dry mineral laced with a hint of faraway ice, and by the time you've taken 20 careful steps, your lashes are damp, and your nose is informally interviewing the idea of a sneeze. You refuse. Sneeze, and you might as well set off fireworks. You swallow the tickle and blink until the horizon doubles and then behaves. Mainstream fact put a little spine in your stealth. Mongol-like cavalry had a way of letting the environment do clerical work. They scouted with the wind so their scent and dust plumes didn't announce them. They read grass lay to judge direction of recent travel. They listened for changes in the wind's tone over hollows and ridges, using that soft shift as a kind of sonar. Mobility wasn't just horses, it was attention. That's the part you can borrow. You can't conjure a pony out of night air, but you can listen, like your life pays hourly. The wind is more than noise, it's an instrument. As you angle away from the cart, it sings on different strings, a dry violin note when it skims bare soil, a breathy flute through broken stalks, and now a faint drumhead thud where the ground hardens under your boots. You crouch palm down. The surface is crusted clay, less forgiving for footprints, but quieter under the wind's cover. You file that under small mercies and keep your steps short, and even the way someone walks when balancing a cup of tea filled too high at a very judgmental tea party. A quirky tidbit to share with your future memoir, steppe travellers sometimes smeared a trace of animal fat across cheekbones and nostrils, To cut the wind's bite, a portable windbreak you could wear. You don't have a tidy jar of tallow tucked in your pocket. It's not that kind of night, but you do remember an old trick twist. The scarf, double it and pinch it high across the nose so the fibres screen the breath. You improvise a face wrap from your cloak's edge, and the wind sting dulls from needle to thimble. Not elegant, but then neither is running for your life while cosplaying as laundry. You top a barely there rise without showing your head tracing the ridgeline like a pencil along the page's margin. The wind increases, and with it comes a different note, something flittering high and intermittent. It could be birds, but the pattern is too regular and night birds don't usually practice scales. You freeze, close your eyes and let your ears do the seeing. 3 short whispers, a pause too long. Whistles. Could be human. Could be the wind tormenting some unlucky reed. Historians still argue about the role of whistling in Mongol field signals. Some insist on bone whistles, and whistling arrows used for coordination and intimidation. Others insist the army relied more on flags by day, and shouted codes up close with whistles reserved for hunts or herding. Tonight the footnote isn't academic. It's moving somewhere out there, possibly toward you. You crouch lower and give the wind a job messenger. You shift so the breeze runs from the sound to your face, then let it carry the pattern again. There are 3 shorts, 2 longs, the same shape. You imagine the map if the sound reaches you cleanly. The source is likely on a line with the wind's arrow. If it fades in and out, they're cutting across. You test a step sideways. The tone fuzzes. Back to the first position. Clear again. So riders almost upwind a bit to your right. You adjust left into thicker grass where the wind's hands work busier, and your own noise can disappear like a coin in a pocket. The steppe smell changes to a little sour milk note threading through the dust, faint as memory, distinct as a bakery at dawn. You picture a leather bag of fermented mare's milk arag tied to a saddle, churning gently while the pony moves. Another sensory memo: you're not alone out here and someone else has beverages. You file that under both discouraging and surprisingly specific. You move in the rhythm of the wind, now stepping as it gusts, pausing as it lulls, like you're dancing with a partner who insists on leading, and is also the entire atmosphere. It's strangely soothing. Your breath steadies, your heart learns to count to 4 again, and your shoulders descend from your ears to a more civilized latitude. In this lull of competence, a treacherous thought arrives: you might actually get away. You swat the optimism before it attracts lightning, but a tiny smile survives the swatting. Even a sarcastic smile is still a smile. Another debate rises as if the wind is paging the Historians' Union. Did Mongol patrols prefer to push a fugitive downwind to let dogs and noses finish the job? Or did they drive upwind so sound would drown, pursuit and panic would do the steering? Accounts disagree, and why wouldn't they? Tactics shift with terrain, season and mood. Your plan, such as it is to choose neither. Keep the wind in your face, make your signs small, leave the dogs arguing with the grass. Your boots find softer ground, dark dampness sugared into the soil. You spot the reason a ribbon of sedge green even in the moon's pale varnish. A seep. You kneel, press a palm and feel coolness. You want to drink with your hand like a pilgrim in a miniature painting, but you check yourself. Wet ground remembers. You use the water skin instead, refilling with care, then swiping your sleeve across the mud you've disturbed, blurring your kneeling mark into the general gossip of hoof prints that pass here each season. You allow yourself 1 long drink, then 2 shorter for tomorrow's you, who is frankly underqualified for the position, but has been promoted by necessity. The wind, pleased with your restraint, brings a gift, a faint chime. Not bells too delicate, but the click of bone beads or metal studs on tack, carried and set down again by the breathing of the night. You freeze, allow your bones to listen. The sound is intermittent, not marching toward you, more like a pendulum swing. Perhaps a tethered pony dozing and shifting. Perhaps a patrol pausing to listen the way you are listening. You flatten into the sedge, make yourself 1 more crease in the steppe's wrinkled sheet. Joke break whispered to the grass, because you need it. You've always wanted a white noise machine for sleep. Congratulations, you've got the Deluxe Steppe Edition wind reeds. Occasional existential dread. No batteries required. You inch forward on elbows for a dozen yards, then rise and resume the wind waltz. The sky has sharpened into a bluer-black stars pricked like pinholes in a travelling tent. Somewhere an owl tries a single note and wisely quits the soundtrack. Your scarf has fogged with your breath and smells faintly of you, which is to say salt worry, and an irresponsible number of apples in your pocket. You consider eating another, then imagine the crunch echoing like a drum solo across Central Asia. Deferred. You need a plan bigger than do not be here, so you borrow a page from shepherds. Move toward broken ground where the wind's song complicates and creates cover. Gullies, stony rises, folds, where sound goes to think. You scan for a change in texture and spot a darker smear. A half-mile left, maybe a shallow ravine, maybe a scab of old riverbed. Either could be your friend. You set a slow course, threading your steps into the wind's commas and periods. Before you go, completely one more practical kindness to future you. You take the rope from your shoulder, cut a short length with your belt knife, and rig a simple chest tie for the water skin, so it stops slapping your hip like a gossiping neighbour. The rest of the coil you wrap tighter and strap across your back. As you tie another tidbit surfaces, some nomads hung tiny reed pipes from tents or gear to sing in strong wind a spirit chime to warn of weather or to keep company through long nights. You glance at your rig and decide the fewer solos it performs, the better. The wind freshens again around a push now, and with it the faintest tremor returns underfoot. You pause heel to ground and let the earth speak, not many, not close, but nearer than you'd like. Nearer than your confidence, certainly. The whistles don't come this time. Instead, you catch a hush that isn't wind, the kind of deliberate quiet that happens when people are listening hard. They might be letting the breeze do the chasing while they read the script of your footprints. You adjust course a hair, angling deeper toward the dark smear, and the wind approves by shouldering harder into your face, making your cloak snap and your eyes tear. It's not comfortable, but it is camouflage. You swallow the last of the tickle in your throat and keep time with the gusts, a pilgrim stapled to the air. You crest a gentle roll and the ground ahead changes tone, less grass, more gravelly hush, and the smear resolves into an old stream bed braided with shallow channels. A tangle of low, dry ruts stitched together like the palm lines of a giant. The wind combs through it and turns the world's white noise up a notch. Footsteps here will vanish into the 1,000 tiny shuffles of pebbles and reed stubs. You can almost feel the relief rising like warm air. Almost. Because on the far lip of that stream bed, right where your path would dip for the first good cover you've seen all night, the starlight catches something that isn't stone, isn't grass, and isn't a trick of your tired eyes. Parallel crescents pressed into the dust, fresh enough to hold their edges circling delicately, as if someone else chose this cover before you, and decided to leave a quiet message. Hoofprints, and not just a few. You stand at the margin of the old stream bed and let your eyes do the slow work that fear always wants to rush. The crescents are crisp, not yet scuffed by wind, each one, a neat parenthesis pressed into dust. The pattern isn't a straight line, no casual crossing, this is a circle. A patient loop sketched by hooves that tested the ground, pivoted, returned, and completed a ring as tidy as a stitched hem. Someone liked this cover. Someone liked it enough to make sure it would still be here for a second look. You crouch to the nearest print and the step's faint light fits into it perfectly, a silver coin lying in a shallow dish. The edges are sharp. A single blade of grass has fallen across one arc, still upright, not yet wilted. You don't need a sundial to know what that means. Whoever made this walked the margin of night close to where you're standing now. You put your palm near the print, feel the lingering cool, no heat, no damp, but you swear the dust remembers. The steppe keeps better accounts than any scribe. Mainstream fact to anchor the pulse. Mongol scouts worked in small knots of 2 or 3, sometimes pairs, that fanned out like scissors cutting fabric, then rejoined with a minimum of torque. They could circle a campsite, read its ashes, reconstruct the number of people and animals, and be trotting on before the smoke forgot its own name. The Tulukma maneuver in circling wings that folded like a book was not just a battlefield trick, it was a habit of mind. They learned to draw circles with hooves, the way accountants draw circles around numbers. This ring at your feet might be a draft in that larger geometry. A quirky tidbit, you can almost taste many steppe riders kept a pouch of dried curds aril hanging from the saddlebow, rock-hard, sour sweet, the kind you work like a lozenge while you ride. Children gnawed them, elders praised them, teeth complained universally. Some travellers said you could judge a household by the tang of its curds the way some people judge a town by its sourdough. You breathe in, searching for that milky ghost, but all you get is dust and cold stone. The aril has moved on. Lucky you if it didn't leave a rider. You let the wind talk for a count of 20. It pages through the grass, riffles the reed stubs below, and combs the gravel into a busy hush. Noise is shelter. You slip into the stream bed and begin stepping in the old ruts, the way a child steps into a parent's footprints at the beach. Pebbles roll and stop their tiny clacks smothered by the breeze. You keep your shoulders low and your head down, and you resist the almost physical urge to sprint for the far lip. Sprinting is drama. Tonight you are a footnote that refuses to be cited. There's a second set of marks you didn't see at first, not hooves. These are smaller, lighter, a line of twin dots like commas drifting across the page. Dog, maybe. Or fox. The intervals are inconsistent, which reads as curiosity rather than patrol. You prefer curiosity. Curiosity can be bribed with smell. You reach for an apple, consider the crunch, and tuck it back with a sigh. Sound is an economy, and tonight you are on an austerity budget. Historians still argue about how much Mongol scouting leaned on hounds. Some sources love the picture of famine-sleek dogs loping at the flank of riders and nosing out fugitives like a moving border patrol. Others insist the army preferred silence and speed, with dogs left at camp to mind the meat. There are paintings with dogs. There are chronicles without them. The archives bicker. The wind holds its own counsel. You decide to assume yes to dogs because yes means you keep your scent pointed into the breeze and your hopes pointed down the stream bed where the terrain grows more complicated and therefore more kind. The channel braids. It gives you choices. You take the shallowest one that offers low banks stitched with sedge and knots of stunted shrubs, whose roots put a gritty lacework under your boots. For the first time tonight you feel invisible without having to pretend. Your shoulders drop a notch, your breath remembers gradient, and your brain, traitorous bureaucrat that it is, files a brief titled Reasons We Might Live. You let it sit in the in tray and do not sign it. Ahead on the streambed's bend, the stones rise into a tangle of fist-sized rubble. The wind plays marbles across them, and each tiny clack has a twin far down the channel, until the sound becomes so many it is no one. You adjust your stride so your footfalls land where pebbles already want to go. It's a minor art, call it step-tap dancing without the tap, and you manage 6, 10, 13 steps before a stone betrays you and pops loudly against another. You freeze. The night freezes. Then the wind resumes like a polite host clearing a throat, and you move again. The smell in the air tilts. Dust and old water give way to something fainter and more social smoke so thin it's almost a rumour. Not wood smoke. There are no trees tall enough nearby to be generous, but that unmistakable, slightly sweet odour of dung fire. You've met it before, fuel made of yesterday's grass and today's necessity. The steppe's original circular economy. You taste it on your tongue and your head turns before your logic remembers to pull the reins. Where there's fuel, there is fire. Where there's fire, there is someone. Where there's someone, there is either help or not help in quantities impossible to predict. You ease up the bank and peer between tufts. At first you see only the sky greedy with stars. Then the ground swims into shape and you catch it, the faintest suggestion of a low-ring earth scuffed into a circle, with 3 glints in the centre, like coins, ash fragments catching starlight. Someone made a fire here not long ago. You study the rim, there are footprints around it, small and large, the small ones with the flat broad look of felt-soled boots, the large ones crescents again. Not a camp exactly, more like a pause that became an argument and then a decision. You kneel and touch the ash. Cold, but when you rub it, a thin grey streak on your fingers brightens as if a thought of heat still lives there. Hours, not days. Modern aside floats in uninvited. This would be easier with a phone and 3 bars. You would text the wind and ask for a pin. But the wind refuses to download apps. You settle for the original notification smell sound vibration. They still deliver. You drift onward, keeping the firing at your back and the streambed's braid to your side. The bells arrive first as memory and then as sound. A tiny irregular chiming that the wind catches and releases, like someone shaking a box of buttons. Camel bells, maybe. Or little metal amulets stitched to a harness. You angle toward them, careful to let the wind carry their music to you instead of you to them. The sound grows not louder but clearer, which is somehow more intimate. You know the difference between close and close enough to matter. You cross another loop of hoofprints. These are deeper, pulled into elongated eggs at the toe where the animal stopped and then started quickly. You imagine a rider who paused to look the way you're pausing, then decided the night had answered whatever question was asked. You wish it had answered yours. Mainstream fact because the mind likes a morsel. Even in famine, Mongol composite bows were short enough to use from horseback, yet powerful enough to punch sense into armour at frightening ranges. The trick wasn't just draw weight. It was the layering wood-horn sinew glued with fish bladder and patience. In dry climates they sang, in wet ones they sulked. The steppe is a dry choir tonight. You glance at the open sky and feel absurdly grateful for the absence of humidity, like a person who has just discovered their hair won't frizz in a crisis. Another quirky tidbit, some steppe folk tucked little fire strikers, steel and flint in pouches worn at the belt sometimes, with a twist of tinder fungus guarded like treasure. Sparks in a cold night are a kind of currency. You check your own belt and feel the small canvas packet that passes for your kit. It's there thin as hope. You touch it the way a clerk taps a pocket to confirm a wage is still a wage. You work the bends until the stream bed rises and smooths. Ahead, land unrolls into the same sighing grass, but the sound of bells now sits more to your left than ahead, and with it an odour that pushes smoke aside wool leather milk. Not strong, not messy. Lived in air. You inch higher and angle toward a shallow line that might be a windbreak or might be wishful thinking. The stars shift over your shoulder and bring with them a shy glow near the ground, a rectangle of shadow that isn't grass, isn't stone. It takes a moment to assemble like a face resolving from a half-remembered dream, and then it clicks. A yurt's felt its wall lines faint, its crown ring a darker coin against the sky. No fire alive inside, no voices, but the smell tells you the rest. Someone uses this. Maybe tonight, maybe not. You stay low and listen. The bells hush. A soft scrape, a snort, the sleepy shuffle of a tethered animal, turning a small circle and deciding sleep is still the best policy. You picture a stake set into the ground, aligned to a pony or a camel, the faint clink of metal on leather. If there is a person, they are better at being quiet than you are at hearing, or they are not there. The steppe tolerates both. Scholars would love to be here, you think, to argue in real time whether such lone shelters marked seasonal grazing rights or acted as postal relay points. Yes, some claim the Mongols had relay stations spaced like beads on a thread, or whether this is simply a family's temporary house left standing because felt is too heavy to pack every time the wind changes its mind. The debate will be footnoted for decades. The night expects you to decide in minutes. You consider the options as solemnly as a judge at a pastry contest. Approach, and you might find water warmth even a human who values hospitality over curiosity. Or you might meet a friend of the riders circling the stream bed. Avoid, and you keep your unknowns intact, safer ignorance, colder comfort, fewer apples eaten with shaking hands. Your fingers touch the little rope coil across your back, and you imagine the yurt's interior curved lattice walls felt hung thick as winter. A bed platform with quilts that smell like smoke and sheep. A low table holding a wooden bowl whose rim is polished by 100 chapped thumbs. The picture is so gentle your bones ache with it. The wind worries your scarf and answers only with its old advice: keep it simple. Keep it upwind, keep it small. You slide one more yard forward to take a final measure, and something moves in the yurt's shadow. Not a person, not large. A shape detaches from the dark pads a few steps, and then you hear the softest chuff, the questioning sound a dog makes when it can't decide whether you're a story worth telling. You hold your breath. The dog holds its. Then from farther off, invisible in the grass, a single whistle. 3 short notes cuts the air and hangs there like a command lost on its way to a rider. The dog turns its head. And so do you. The dog is still watching you, its ears cocked forward, its shape just visible against the darker fold of the yurt wall. Its breath comes in little puffs, white ghosts in the starlight, and for a strange instant you imagine the two of you as conspirators, both aware of something larger moving across the grass. Then the whistle drifts again, 3 short notes sharp but not loud, the kind of sound made for ears tuned by repetition. The dog turns its head toward the noise tail stiff. You stay as still as stone, except stones don't usually sweat this much. The wind tugs at your scarf and adds another layer to your worry. The breeze is no longer steady, it's swirling, playing its own game of tag between yurt and stream bed, carrying your scent in directions you can't quite predict. It's like trying to keep a secret in a room full of gossips. No matter how quiet you are, someone will whisper it for you. You press lower hands cold against the soil and let your ears replace your eyes. Mainstream fact to keep you occupied while fear draws its maps. Mongol scouts often carried small reed flutes or whistles, not just for signalling but to mimic birds. Chroniclers describe owlish hoots, lark-like chirps or staccato whistles that could trick a traveller into thinking they were alone with nature, when in fact the cavalry was arranging itself nearby. For Mongols, the landscape was not empty, it was an orchestra waiting to be conducted. Tonight, you're in the cheap seats listening without a program. Quirky tidbit. There are old tales, half folktale, half anecdote of dogs that switched allegiances on the steppe. A village dog might trail a stranger if it thought they carried better scraps or even tag along for miles, before wandering back fattened by generosity. Some even became mascots for merchant caravans, remembered in scribbled travelogues as the brown one or the limper. You study this dog, its head cocked, its paws restless. Will it betray you with a bark, or will it follow you out of curiosity like an unpaid intern who enjoys chaos? Historians still debate the role of dogs in Mongol life. Some argue they were indispensable guarding herds and yurts, their voices part of the steppe's nightly soundtrack. Others say the nomads distrusted dogs for their noise, preferring hawks and horses as their companions. The truth is likely both shifting with family and clan, but in this moment, you're personally invested in the indispensable and quiet school of thought. You hold your breath and hope the dog subscribes to the same. The whistle doesn't repeat. Instead, the sound of hooves arrives faintly, like someone tapping fingers on a drum a room away. The rhythm is lazy, unhurried, but steady enough to make the earth mutter under your palms. You feel the vibration more than you hear it. Riders 2, perhaps maybe 3, passing at a walk rather than a gallop. Which is worse, somehow their calmness suggesting they're not hunting in panic, but hunting with confidence. You shift your weight, thinking of options. The yurt could be shelter. Inside there might be felt blankets, a low bed, maybe even a hidden jar of curds. But shelter can also be a cage, especially if its owner, or worse, its owner's allies, return suddenly. To step inside could be safety or disaster, and the margin is as thin as the fabric itself. The dog huffs again, steps forward once, then stops. It hasn't barked, not yet. Maybe it hasn't decided what story you belong to. You risk a tiny movement touching the rope coil at your back, as though you could barter it rope for silence, rope for loyalty. Absurd, of course, but desperation writes its own bargains. The wind surges once more louder, almost triumphant. For a moment it drowns everything, whistles, hooves your heart. And when it fades, the silence that follows is absolute, so clean you wonder if you've gone deaf. Then in that blankness comes the soft clink of metal deliberate close, a stirrup shifting a rider, correcting their seat. The sound is behind you now. You freeze caught between the dark yurt and the darker plain, a dog on one side, a rider on the other, the wind itself unwilling to pick a favourite. You know you must choose slip inside and trust the emptiness within, or melt into the grass and trust the emptiness without. And whichever choice you make, the steppe will remember. Because the night doesn't forget the sound of a footfall once it's been placed. The silence hangs around you like a heavy cloak, and you swear the air itself is listening. The dog's eyes glint in the starlight, catching whatever light the heavens care to spill. Its head turns one way, then the other, nostrils twitching like a living compass. And you're frozen in a half-crouch, halfway between flight and collapse, your legs trembling not from exhaustion this time, but from the strain of staying still. Stillness is a skill you never thought you'd need at this level. Funny how survival comes down to acting like a badly carved statue when everything inside screams run. Your ears stretch themselves thin, searching for the faintest sound. First you hear only the grass, thousands of blades rehearsing the same hiss, swaying in a rhythm that's older than memory. Then beneath that hush, the faint shuffle again, hooves, sliding, not pounding, a horse easing weight from one leg to another. The rider isn't rushing. Whoever it is has the patience of a tax collector, certain they'll get what's owed. Mainstream fact for context, you didn't ask for Mongol patrols rarely exhausted themselves on a single fugitive. Their empire was stitched together by patience as much as by speed. Scouts were trained to watch to herd, to wait until the quarry ran out of ground. They didn't need to rush when the land itself was their accomplice. Tonight the land has become your cubicle, and your only tool is how long you can keep clocking in before someone notices. Quirky tidbit to distract you. Some steppe households kept bells not just for animals but sewn into children's clothes. Tiny bronze chimes tinkled as toddlers wandered the grass, making them easier to find if they strayed. A Mongol lullaby of sorts jingles instead of bedtime stories. You imagine with a grim smile that maybe the faint bells you thought you heard earlier weren't warriors at all, but echoes of some lost childhood garment still swaying in the steppe wind. That comforting image doesn't last, but you cling to it anyway because comfort, like rope or water, is a survival tool. The scholars bicker in your imagination, were Mongol night raids always silent? Or did they deliberately make noise, whistles, bells, even drums to unnerve their prey? Persian chroniclers insist the Mongols used silence like a blade, but European writers centuries later describe eerie choruses of sound as if the horde carried the weather with them. Which is true, you're leaning towards silence because that's what is hunting you now. The dog suddenly shifts its weight. Its nails scratch the earth softly like quills scratching a page, and its gaze fixes not on you but past you. It lifts its head ears, straining toward the plain, then lowers again uncertain. That indecision buys you a breath of courage. You inch sideways, keeping low moving, not toward the yurt, but toward the far lip of the streambed again. Each step feels monumental, though in truth you barely cross a yard. The wind is fickle now, swirling and curling sometimes on your cheek, sometimes at your back. You try to angle your movements so your scent never drifts where you think the riders might be, but the breeze argues. It's like negotiating with a cat, polite effort, little guarantee. The scarf around your face grows damp with your own breath, and you silently thank the night for at least muffling that noise. Then the sound comes again, this time unmistakable. A low creak of leather followed by the faintest metallic jingle like a spur brushing a stirrup. It's close, closer than before, perhaps only a few dozen paces away. You imagine the rider pausing, scanning eyes narrowed against the dark ears pricked like the dog's. Do they know, or are they simply adjusting tack in boredom while waiting for you to reveal yourself? You shift your weight onto your toes, ready to sink fully into the grass when something new joins the chorus. Far above the sky splits with a thin streak of light, a meteor brief and brilliant flashing across the horizon before vanishing. For a heartbeat, the land is lit in silver. You freeze eyes wide, certain the glow has painted you like a torch. The moment passes quickly, but paranoia lingers. The steppe remembers light longer than the sky does. Your heart thrums so loudly you worry it's audible. You press a hand against your chest as if to smother the noise. Another absurd thought surfaces, a modern aside. This feels like walking down the grocery aisle at midnight, when someone follows you with squeaky wheels, except this time the cart has a bow and arrows. You nearly laugh, and that nearly breaks you, but you catch it just in time. Laughter isn't stealthy. The dog gives a low grunt. Not a bark, not even a growl. Just a sound of acknowledgement. And then, surprisingly, it turns and pads back toward the yurt, disappearing into shadow. Relief and suspicion tumble together. Did the animal abandon you? Or worse, did it return to alert whoever owns that tent? The not knowing feels sharper than any arrow. You decide the streambed is still your ally. You slide down again, flattening yourself against its pebbly floor, and inch forward with elbows and knees. The stones shift, but the wind's new vigour swallows the sound. Your progress is slow, humiliatingly slow, but it feels safer than rising. Inch by inch you stretch distance between yourself and the yurt, between yourself and the sound of tack leather, between yourself and the decision you don't want to make. Historians might later argue that fugitives on the steppe had no chance. But others might point to stories of traders in voies, even lone monks who slipped through Mongol nets by wit luck or sheer stubborn walking. You cling to those stories the way one clings to driftwood, because as the hoofbeats shuffle again, deliberate and careful, you know the hunt isn't over. You pause, cheek pressed to the dust, and the earth vibrates faintly under your skin. Not thunder, not a gallop, just the steady heartbeat of hooves reminding you that patience, not speed, may be your doom. But the land never runs out of surprises, and the next bend in this streambed will show you something stranger still. You decide that surprises are best handled with walls. Not fortress walls, those are in short supply out here, but felt will do, a portable horizon you can pull close. You angle back toward the yurt in a low smooth curve, as if you've always belonged to this patch of grass and are only now remembering your address. The dog has vanished inside or around or into the idea of itself, but the faint wool and smoke smell still floats like a breadcrumb trail. You keep the wind on your face because old habits keep their promises. Then, at the final yards, you go to hands and knees and become a travelling carpet. Pebbles kiss your palms, dried sedge brushes your wrists. The felt wall lifts half an inch in the breeze and drops again, a slow wink. You take that for permission. The door is a narrow rectangle wooden frame, felted flap-turned, as many doors on the steppe are away from the worst winds. You do the polite thing and don't step on the threshold. Even in a hurry, some taboos deserve respect. You tap the frame once the gentlest knock because manners cost nothing and might buy everything. The night answers with its old silence. You slide inside. Darkness folds around you, soft, not empty. The yurt breathes you in wool leather old milk, a whiff of ash that belongs to earlier conversations with fire. Your eyes take their time. First the geometry emerges, the latticework wall khana, making diamonds everywhere you look, each junction tied with strips that are smoother than your breath. Above roof poles uni meet at a crown Tuno, the smoke hole that doubles as a star window, now covered against night and weather. The space is a circle that pretends to be a universe. It works. You feel smaller, which tonight is a win. You move with pilgrimage care. The floor is packed earth firm enough to remember footprints, but layered with felt rugs whose edges curl like sleeping cats. On the right, a low bed platform with stacked quilts, the topmost patterned in reds that your eyes file as warmth. On the left, a simple chest with an iron hasp closed, a wooden bowl on a three-legged stand polished by a century of hands, a ladle whose handle has learned the shape of hungry fingers. And in the middle, the iron hearth seat cold now but ringed with the ash of 100 patient meals. You stand very still at the edge of the circle, because you've read somewhere, perhaps in a traveller's tale, perhaps in a wish, that stepping across that centre without invitation is bad form. Tonight you collect every ounce of good form you can find. Mainstream fact to make the space speak a nomad's yurt gia, if you prefer the Mongolian term, organises life by compass and custom. The north side, opposite the door, is the place of honour where family altars or treasured objects rest. Men's gear saddles, tack bows often lives to the west, women's tools, cooking pots, churns to the east, and the hearth binds both to the sky through the Tuno. Doors commonly face south to take the sun and avoid the worst of northern storms. This house is textbook, a lesson written in felt and string. You feel smarter just for not bumping into anything. A quirky tidbit crouches nearby, pleased to be noticed, dangling from one roof pole, is a tiny bundle of blue cloth, perhaps a strip of silk, perhaps part of a kadag scarf, tied with a knot that looks both ceremonial and practical. It might be an offering, it might be a charm. Some families sprinkle milk towards sky and earth at dawn, honouring spirits and thanking the animals. You imagine that arc of white liquid light catching it like a comet brought indoors. Your throat tightens at the thought of milk. You swallow nothing and keep looking. On a peg by the door hangs a leather bag collapsed into itself. You lift it carefully, feeling the stiffness of well-used skin. Your nose confirms what your hopes already typed Ereg once lived here. Fermented mare's milk, sour and tangy. The steppe sports drink, long before anyone marketed electrolytes. The bag is nearly dry, but a single obedient drop slides to the mouth when you tilt it. You catch it on your tongue. Sour lightning. Your mouth puckers so hard you nearly whistle by accident. You grin into the dark, a little drunk on that tiny permission to exist. You set the bag back exactly as you found it because gratitude and theft have a complicated relationship. You do, however, let your fingers graze the wooden churn leaning in the corner, its handle smooth with the teaching of 1,000 mornings. The yurt answers with a creak. You freeze, counting through the known sounds, breeze nibbling the felt your cloak, thinking about settling the dog there, a soft sigh from somewhere behind the bed platform. So the dog is inside, after all, a silent roommate with opinions. Historians still argue about what precisely a traveller could expect from steppe hospitality in Mongol times. Some sources paint a picture of open doors and shared bowls, refuse a guest and disgrace your ancestors. Welcome strangers because on this land everyone is a stranger eventually. Other accounts stress caution, hospitality reserved for kin and allies, suspicion toward lone wanderers in the dark, particularly when empires are hungry and information is meat. The imperial postal relay, the yam, complicates the story further. Scholars debate how uniform it was, whether its stations offered shelter to any messenger, or only to those whose tablets of authority gleamed with the right seals. Tonight's yurt is not a relay station, no official plaques on the door, no line of spare ponies tied like punctuation outside, but your bones beg for the version of history with warm bowls and shared quilts. Your bones are famously biased. You crouch by the hearth and consider a spark. A tiny one, just enough to warm a hand and talk to your heartbeat about slowing down. You draw out your little striker and tinder, then put them away again. Fire is a gossip. It tells neighbours you are home. It tells riders which door to knock. Instead, you build a different warmth. You pull a quilt corner, then another, easing the lightest blanket to your shoulders, with reverence and with the acrobatic care of someone removing a napkin from a table set for a king. The fabric smells like smoked linoleum and sleep. It is impossible not to exhale. You wrap yourself, sit with your back to the lattice where the wall is firm and become furniture. Your eyes drift up to the Tuno. The cover is pulled but not tight. A star has found a pinhole and is winking at you with insufferable confidence. You let that be your candle. Beyond the walls, the wind has calmed into a long sigh, the kind an ocean makes after an argument with the shore. The steppe has its tides too, grass not water, and tonight they are low, because you're here to live as well as to learn your inventory like a careful clerk. On the chest, a small knife bone-handled clean. In the bowl's shadow, a twist of something dark tea maybe, or dried herbs tied with thread. At the bed's foot felt boots, one toppled, one standing their soles, whispering of mornings you hope were gentle. Beside the door, a rolled rawhide line and a wooden peg. Hitching gear. You imagine hands working these things quick. Practiced probably kinder than your imagination gives them credit for. People tend to be kinder in houses they've built themselves. A modern aside tips in like a wink. If this were a hotel, you'd leave a note for housekeeping and tip excessively for the quilt. Instead, you plan to leave nothing but even footprints, and a stronger wish to write thank you letters to the universe. The customer service here is mostly cosmic. Your body loosens under the quilt. The dog sighs again and shifts nails, ticking once on a board you can't see. On a whim, you slide an apple from your pocket and roll it gently across the floor toward the sound. It bumps. A rug edge makes a small, polite thud and stops. The dog sniffs. A soft scrape. Another sigh. You can hear the calculation edible, interesting, permitted. A few quiet bites later, the answer seems to be yes. You smile at the alliance you've just negotiated without words. Before your mind floats off on warm milk and gratitude, you give it the promised fact, the oddity, the question. The fact you already felt in your bones, yurts are engineered for speed, as much as comfort collapsing to a bundle. A few strong backs can hoist, then reappearing in a new place as if the landscape had grown a new room. The quirky tidbits some households tie little toys or charms to the lattice for toddlers. Bone horses felt birds, so that the house itself becomes a playground that travels. You spot a tiny stitched bird now, its wings forever mid-flutter, and forgive the universe a little more. The scholarly debate lingering like smoke were the decorative patterns on felt, those swirling ram's horns and flowing vines, primarily clan markers readable at a distance. Or were they mostly aesthetics with meanings only families could decode? The argument is as endless as the patterns and softer than most wars. You settle deeper, the quilt giving you permission to be a person again instead of a problem. Outside, the wind turns a page. The yurt creaks, a satisfied grandmother shifting in her chair. Your eyes drift closed just for a moment, just alone, you tell yourself, and you promise to wake if the dog moves, if the bells jingle, if the earth hums, which is why the sound finds you anyway, a slow, careful footstep pressing the threshold would await testing. Whether the house it remembers still remembers, it followed by the softest shake of felt as the door flap begins to lift. The flap of the yurt lifts slowly, so slowly it could almost be the wind pretending to be a hand. But you know better. The felt edge sways, the faint wooden creak of the doorframe follows, and a new draught of air slides in colder, sharper, carrying with it the smell of horse sweat and leather that hasn't lived in this yurt for at least a few hours. You don't move. Even the quilt you've wrapped around your shoulders feels like it's holding its breath with you. The dog gives the tiniest rumble, not quite a growl, more like a complaint muttered in sleep. You and the dog share a philosophy: let's not escalate unless forced. A silhouette presses into the door space, faintly backlit by starlight. It is the unmistakable outline of a man, head wrapped in a hood or cap. One hand on the felt flap, the other balancing something long and straight, staff, spear or bow, you can't be sure. The figure hesitates at the threshold, as if listening, as if waiting for the house to confess whether it is alone. In this moment you are less a fugitive than a shadow, and you pray the yurt agrees to shelter you as one of its own shadows. Mainstream fact for context. Mongol warriors were taught from childhood to move silently. Games of stealth, mock hunts and stalking drills were part of their upbringing. By adulthood, slipping into a yurt without waking its inhabitants wasn't bravado, it was muscle memory. Chroniclers in China and Persia alike described them as shadows on horseback. Tonight you're experiencing what those writers meant. Quirky tidbit, some nomads believed the flap of a yurt's door carried spiritual weight. It was rude to step on it, unlucky to slam it, and sometimes even considered a threshold between the world of humans and spirits. That makes the man's pause logical in more ways than one. He's not just listening for you, he's acknowledging that this crossing is significant. Of course, to you it's significant because your life may dangle on the other side of it. Historians still debate how Mongols treated strangers found near or in yurts. Some sources tell of ruthless capture. Outsiders were interrogated immediately. Others insist hospitality was a law. Even warriors obeyed. A man might be your enemy in the field, but once under your roof he was a guest. Both traditions could be true depending on the moment, the clan, the mood. And here you are in the footnote between those two contradictory laws, hoping to be remembered as a guest and not as an opportunity. The man enters the flap settling behind him. He stands for a moment in the dimness eyes, adjusting nose working. You try to make yourself one with the latticework wall quilt wrapped tight face tucked into shadow. Your heart beats so hard you think it might vibrate the wooden poles. The dog shifts again, sighs, and then remarkably lays its head back down. That choice from the creature who has more right to this space than you do might save you. The man walks softly to the centre near the cold hearth. He kneels, fingers brushing the ash, feeling for heat the same way you did earlier. Finding none, he makes a small, satisfied grunt. His hand moves to the chest. He opens it, rummages, pulls out something you can't see clearly. The faint rustle suggests fabric, maybe spare felt or clothing. He sets it aside, then lifts the wooden ladle from the bowl, peers inside, shakes it, once replaces it carefully. His movements are unhurried, efficient, the ritual of someone returning home to check that all is as he left it. Your body screams at you to stay hidden, but the quilt feels both shield and trap. The smell of your sweat must be thick in the room even beneath the wool. Does he notice? His head turns slightly, nostrils flaring. You shift your weight by a hair, praying the creak of your joints doesn't join the conversation. Then outside, a new sound interrupts the soft jingle of tack, followed by a low whistle, different from before, lower, longer. The man stiffens, rises quickly, and strides back to the door. He lifts the flap halfway, leans out, and answers with a matching whistle. A code, a conversation carried on the wind. He steps outside, felt closing behind him, and the yurt is yours again for now. The dog lifts its head and looks at you as if to say, "You're not supposed to be here," but it doesn't bark. It settles back down. You exhale into the quilt, every nerve in your body shivering with the release. You're safe. Temporarily. But outside, the riders are gathering, and whatever signal was exchanged means they're not finished. The steppe still wants you out in its wide, merciless open, and you'll have to face it again sooner than you want. You count 5 breaths long, velvet careful, and then give the house back to the person it belongs to. The quilt slides off your shoulders in a hush, your feet rediscover the floor, and you become a roomer moving toward the door. The dog watches with that practical curiosity dogs bring to everything. Are you edible? Are you in charge? Are you leaving soon? You answer the only question that matters by touching 2 fingers to the floor, in a tiny thank you then to your forehead, a promise to be the kind of stranger a house can forgive. The felt flap lifts at your touch. Cold air pours in, crisp as bitten apple. You slip through sideways the way a respectful shadow would. Outside, the steppe's night presses its cool palm across your whole face. The wind has softened again. The world sounds upholstered, every edge padded with dew. To your right, somewhere in the grasses, slow surf leather creaks, and a horse stamps rider, still near, still patient. Ahead and left, though the sound you've been courting returns a faint chain of delicate chimes, irregular as if someone were shaking a box of teaspoons in their sleep. Bells. Not loud, not insistent, suggestive. You angle toward them because the wind, fickle as ever, is finally bringing you a trail made of sound. You keep low knees, bent cloak tucked each step, placed inside the wind's own footsteps. A handful of stars has slipped behind a slow-moving cloud, turning the grass to ink with silver handwriting on top. Your eyes become greedy for shapes, inventing them where none exist and doubting them where they do. Still, the bells steady your course, a small tinkle, a pause, a second tiny note like distant laughter that can't decide if it has a joke yet. Mainstream fact to give your fear, a desk and a lamp caravans crossing these regions often hung little bells from camels' or mules' gear, not to summon enemies, but to keep a string of animals together to make counting easier in darkness, and to keep pace on long lulling trudges. In some markets, bell tone even signalled origin the way an accent does Kashgar's chime, different from Samarkand's. The Mongol Empire, once it settled into the business of ruling, profited from such caravans taxing and protecting them, folding trade routes into the imperial postal road like extra lanes added to a highway. Tonight you're hoping for the gentle kind of traffic a trader's camp, not a patrol's trap. Quirky tidbit traders sometimes tucked bits of fragrant resin frankincense, when they had it juniper when they didn't, into pack knots, so the animals would carry a hint of sweetness with the sweat. Call it medieval aromatherapy for beasts of burden. As you move, a whisper of resin finds your nose thin and clean like the memory of a pine forest that never lived here. A little hope but scented. Historians still argue about the prevalence of camel bells on this part of the steppe. Some sources insist bells were more common farther south and west in sandy caravansaries and on proper desert routes. Others point to accounts of bells even in grasslands, particularly where fog and dawn haze made keeping line difficult. The truth is probably a geography of habits bells wherever distance wanted a leash. You don't care who wins the footnote war. You're following the melody because it's a string you can hold. You move through grass that's damp at the tips and dry below your boots, whispering as if reading lines from a script you haven't seen before. Every few steps you stop to let your pulse settle. The earth beneath your palm is quiet, no gallop, only the gentle bass note of a grazing animal shifting weight. You picture a camel's lazy chew, a mule's ear flick. You picture less happily a rider with a sense of humour adding bells to a trap. Paranoia is free. You budget generously. The chimes lead you to a shallow fold in the land where the wind sleeps. You flatten at the lip and let your eyes adjust. At first you see only the dark geometry of bundles, 2-3 shapes, no taller than a person lying down each, with the soft-edged look of goods wrapped in felt and tied with a rope. Beyond them a camel kneels, its long neck folded into itself like a complicated question. A rope runs from its nose peg to a wooden stake. A second rope disappears to a shape you can't fully read, another animal perhaps asleep so completely it has become furniture. The bells are on the camel's chest strap, 4 or 5 small ones each catching a star and losing it again. No people in sight. You wait. The steppe waits back. The camel sighs a long theatrical exhale that smells faintly of cud and the long road. It shifts bells, gossip briefly, then stillness returns. You edge closer, keeping to the fold's low line until you're near enough to read the bundle's knots. Packer's work. Competent, quick. You've seen worse at city gates. You reach out slow as dawn and touch the nearest rope, feeling for that slickness old hemp gets from many hands. Still warm from the day. Recently made. Whoever left this hasn't gone far or hasn't been gone for long. Both truths prickle your neck. You unhook your water skin and weigh it. Light. The camel wears a small water skin of its own leather, dark as old tea, tied against its flank. You know the etiquette in your bones, take and leave in balance if you must take at all. You ease the stopper, pour a conservative mouthful into your skin, and then, because debts are stories you'd like told kindly, you roll one of your apples under the bundle's edge, tucked, where a waking hand will find it as a small perplexity fortune having a sense of humour. A shuffle above hoof on turf, you freeze an exclamation mark trying to be a comma. The sound is not a patrol's crisp correction. It's the lazy half-step of an animal dreaming about standing. You risk a glance up the fold and see framed in the gentle hue of land a pony untethered tail switching head down. No rider, no saddle. Your heart argues with your ethics at conversational volume. Unclaimed horsepower, silent night bells that could keep time for you instead of for them. You approach the pony at the tempo of trust, 3 steps, pause, breath, 3 steps. You angle your shoulders, eyes down the universal language of I'm not a big cat. The pony flicks an ear and blows air through its nose in a brief musical snort that smells like hay translated into steppe. You extend your hand, palm flat, and let the animal confirm you are neither edible nor lightning. Warm muzzle, soft inquiry, a velvet stamp of acceptance. You find the rawhide line in your coil, make a loop and ease it under the jaw with apologies in every finger. The knot settles. The pony sighs as if conversation were settled too. Mainstream addendum to your growing courage. Mongol saddles high-backed and efficient. Let riders rise to shoot and sit to charge, and their stirrups were the iron arguments that turned cavalry into airborne archery. You don't have a saddle. You have a mane and a spine that is considering legal action. But bareback is still more back than your own 2 feet in a country designed for hooves. You stroke the pony's neck, whisper a promise you hope to keep gentle, quick away, and test a knee against its round barrel. Quirky tidbit for your future memoir, chapter. Things, my tailbone. Still remembers some steppe folk swore by a trick of gripping with the inner thigh while letting your ankles hang loose the better to move with the animal instead of against it. You try it. Your legs discover new vocabulary, most of it surprised. The pony shifts, accepts your weight, and waits for instructions like a junior clerk with a good attitude. You align your body with the wind because even theft feels better when it's well ventilated. Scholars chirp in the margins of your mind, was it common for caravans and nomad camps to sleep animals, loosely trusting the herd's sense to bunch and return, or did careful folks tether everything always because a stray at dawn is a lawsuit waiting to happen? Accounts divide along lines of wealth, terrain, and temperament. You decide the original owner of this pony believed in the kindness of geography or in short errands. You also decide to believe in courtesy returned. You will leave the rawhide loop where it can be reclaimed if the world lets you. You nudge the pony along the fold away from the bells and the kneeling camel. The animal steps softly as if the ground were someone's pillow. Every few paces you stop and listen. The night offers only its low ocean hush, the grass sliding past itself in long restful breaths. The yurt is a faint square behind you now. The patrol's tack noise never returns. For the first time since the hooves woke you, movement feels like something you chose rather than something you owed. A modernized surfaces wearing a crooked smile. This is carjacking, except the car is fluffy, has opinions, and prefers grass to gasoline. On the plus side, insurance paperwork is minimal. You guide the pony toward a darker seam in the horizon, low hills stitched together by shadows. Broken ground will help swallow you. You keep the wind on your face so your scent trails behind into a map no one needs to read. The pony's ears turn like radar dishes sampling the dark. Twice it pauses and blows softly a small cloud that dissolves before it can become a problem. You murmur nonsense in a tone that means everything. The animal seems to accept that confidence is edible, and then just when you start thinking you might write a smug letter to your future self about bravery and ponies, the earth beneath the pony's forefoot changes its mind. The soil gives with a surprised sigh a crust over emptiness, and the foreleg plunges knee-deep into a hidden burrow. The pony grunts, lurches bells far behind you, stutter, and the hills kind a moment ago become a chorus of questions you have to answer very quickly and very quietly. The pony's stumble jerks you forward, and for a heartbeat you think the earth itself has chosen sides against you. Its foreleg plunges into a burrow, or a pocket of soft ground, and the jolt nearly unseats you. Your body pitches forward, arms, flailing fingers clutching a handful of mane with the same desperate faith as someone clinging to a subway pole during a sudden stop. The pony snorts in alarm, a harsh blast of air that fogs into the cold night, and your heart nearly matches it with its own explosive note. You dismount fast because dead weight on a panicked animal is a recipe for both of you to end up horizontal. Knees bend, feet hit the earth, and your hands are already moving to free the trapped leg. The pony struggles once-twice, muscles twitching, but you place your palm on its neck and murmur nonsense words in a rhythm meant to soothe. It doesn't matter what you say, tax returns, laundry lists, bedtime playlists, as long as the tone is low, steady, convincing. Amazingly, it listens. Animals on the steppe know the language of tone better than people do. You crouch at the hole. The soil is loose, crumbly, the work of burrowing creatures. Fox, marmot, maybe a ground owl's abandoned nest. The leg is wedged but not broken. The hoof sinks into soil, not stone. You dig with bare hands, scooping cold dirt fingernails, scraping until the pony lifts again. For a terrifying second you think it will tumble over, but with a grunt and another burst of breath it finds balance. The leg comes free, coated in dust but otherwise sound. You rub the joint testing for heat or swelling. Trembles but holds. Relief washes through you so hard your knees nearly give. Mainstream fact Mongols were masters of horse care. They bred ponies tough enough to graze under snow, but they also rotated them constantly. Each rider kept 3 to 5 mounts, switching often to avoid fatigue. It wasn't indulgence, it was military logistics. A horse was as vital as a sword, and maybe more so. Losing one to carelessness could be as shameful as losing a battle. Tonight you feel the weight of that truth in your shaking hands. You have one horse, not 5. If this one falters, so do you. A quirky tidbit some travellers wrote that steppe riders believed certain marmot burrows brought luck if stepped over, but doom if stepped in. The line between charm and curse could be as fine as the edge of a hole. You glance at the disturbed earth and half joke to yourself, congratulations, you've tripped into the unlucky category. Maybe the marmots are laughing underground. Maybe they're recording footnotes in their tiny dirt library, one fugitive clumsy past here. Historians still argue whether Mongol patrols used animal trails deliberately to trap or funnel fugitives. Some suggest they drove herds into certain areas, then watched the ground for inevitable accidents, because tired humans and frightened horses almost always stumbled where nature had dug its snares. Others say patrols didn't need such tricks. The open land was trap enough. Either way, tonight's stumble proves the point the steppe doesn't need to choose sides. It simply provides opportunities for mistakes. You lead the pony by the rawhide loop, testing each step. It limps once, then steadies, shaking its mane as though shrugging off the accident. You stroke its neck, whisper thanks, and consider your options. Riding may be faster, but another fall could end the journey before it begins. Walking may be slower, but at least both of you will remain upright. You choose a compromise mount lightly. Keep your weight forward. Ride no faster than a careful walk. Pride has no place here. Survival does. The wind picks up again, cool fingers slipping into your cloak, rustling the grass in restless sheets. Each gust feels like a reminder you're not alone out here. The bells from the camel camp are quieter now, or perhaps distance has muted them. Behind you, though, the land hums faintly again. Hooves? Maybe. Or maybe your nerves vibrating against your ribs. The pony flicks its ears back, listening too. That's confirmation enough. The hunt hasn't ended. A modern aside surfaces absurd and perfect. This is like trying to sneak out of a convenience store at midnight with an armful of snacks, while the automatic doors squeak behind you. Every step feels like an announcement, every creak a confession. Except instead of a bored clerk, you've got mounted warriors with bows. No pressure. The stars above widen as clouds drift apart, turning the world brighter, crueler. You and the pony move toward the darker seam of hills' shadows that promise broken ground. But the memory of the stumble lingers, making you suspicious of every dip, every hollow, every promising shortcut. You scan the earth as carefully as you scan the sky, searching for safe passage. The steppe is both ally and adversary, offering cover and pitfalls in equal measure. Your body is tired, but adrenaline has its own strange mercy. Your senses sharpen, attuned to the rhythm of hooves. Your own pony's careful clip the imagined echo behind you. Each time the wind pauses, your heart expects pursuit to leap into the silence. Each time it gusts, you wonder what noise it hides. The chase continues, whether or not you can see it. At last, a slope ahead rises into stony ribs, rocks jutting like the bones of the earth. The pony hesitates at the rough terrain, but you urge it forward. Hooves clatter softly, the sound swallowed by the wind. The higher you climb, the more the plain stretches behind you, a sea of grass under stars dotted with shadows you can't trust. Somewhere out there, riders move. The question isn't whether they always do, it's how close. You reach a ridge, dismount, and lead the pony into a shallow alcove between boulders. The rock is cold, but steady, a wall you can trust for the first time all night. You press your back to it, listening, waiting, every nerve strung taut. The pony lowers its head, nickers softly, then falls silent. You stroke its muzzle, grateful and afraid, and then from the plain below a sound drifts upward, a whistle high, and sharp, answered by another farther away. They're talking to each other. The net is still out there, and you are still inside it. The rock may shelter you for now, but dawn is coming, and with it visibility. You can't hide in shadows forever. You'll need a plan before the light decides your fate. The ridge feels like a pause button, but you know better pauses in the steppe are never permanent. You lean against the cold stone, its rough surface pressing through your cloak, and let your eyes wander across the vast horizon. The grass sea below seems endless, flowing in waves each time the wind stirs it. For a moment, if you squint, you can almost pretend you're looking at an ocean at night, with silvered crests instead of foam. But no ocean has hoofprints, and no tide whistles signals across the dark. The pony stands beside you, ears swiveling like weather vanes. Every shift of its head communicates something: attention, worry, suspicion. Its breath fogs the air warm against the rock, reminding you that this animal, however borrowed, is your best chance at surviving the next hour. You pat its neck softly, partly to calm it, partly to reassure yourself that not everything in this landscape is set against you. The pony sighs, flicks its tail, and leans a little closer as if to say, "Fine, we're in this together." You crouch and study the ground. The earth here is rocky, less forgiving than the soft grass, but that's good rock holds fewer tracks. You test with your palm, no fresh tremors. For now at least the riders haven't climbed this high. Still the whistles echo faintly from below, one sharp, then another answering after a pause. A code no doubt, but one you can't decipher. You imagine it means, "We know you're here," or worse, "We'll wait until dawn." Mainstream fact Mongol communication was astonishingly efficient. Scouts carried information across miles with hand signals, flags, whistles, or simply relayed riders spaced so perfectly that a message could travel hundreds of miles in a single day. Chroniclers compared it to magic. To you it feels more like bureaucracy on horseback, efficient, terrifying, and inevitable. Outrunning horses is hard. Outrunning information is impossible. Quirky tidbits and Mongol patrols carried carved wooden message sticks with notches or painted marks that conveyed instructions to allies. These were physical tweets passed hand to hand across the grasslands, unedited and immediate. One story even claims that a patrol once passed a stick that simply read, "Still chasing over 50 miles of terrain." You picture some poor rider on the far end sighing, "Great thanks for the update," before saddling up again. Tonight you feel like you're starring in one of those endless relay notes, except no one asked your opinion about being the subject. Scholarly debate hovers at the edges of your fear. Some argue Mongol scouts preferred to let fugitives run themselves, ragged never striking until exhaustion guaranteed capture. Others insist they acted quickly ending pursuits before word could spread, or luck could intervene. Both tactics are logical, and both might apply to you. Are they waiting for you to tire, or are they waiting for the sky to lighten so their arrows won't miss? The uncertainty gnaws at you more than hunger ever could. You crouch lower, tugging the pony gently into the shadow of the rocks. Its body warmth leaks into the air, steady and grounding. You open your water-skin sip carefully. The liquid tastes faintly of leather and dust, but it's life. Your throat thanks you, even if your tongue protests. You chew one of the last apples that crunch loud in your head, though probably inaudible over the restless wind. Still you flinch at every bite, convinced you've just announced your presence with orchard percussion. The wind itself has turned fickle again, no longer steady but swirling. One moment it's in your face, the next at your back. Each shift feels like betrayal. It means your scent is scattering in every direction, telling invisible stories to anyone with a nose and patience. The pony notices too. It lifts its head, sniffing uneasy. You tug its line softly and whisper, "Shh." It's just the wind's bad mood. It doesn't believe you. Neither do you. You scan the horizon. Far in the distance, faint glimmers appear, fires maybe, or stars flirting with the earth. If they're fires, then other camps are nearby, perhaps traders or other nomads. Allies if you're lucky, witnesses if you're not. But to reach them, you'd have to leave the safety of this rocky shelf, cross back into the open, where whistles already lace the dark. The thought chills you more than the wind ever could. The pony stamps once impatient. You stroke its muzzle, steadying it, but your mind races. Could you use the rocks to your advantage? The broken ground here is confusing to navigate, full of gullies and ridges. Horses move best on plains. In hills, their speed falters. If you weave through the stony maze, maybe you could outlast the pursuit. It's a gamble, but then again everything tonight has been a gamble. A modern aside sneaks in absurd and comforting. It feels like playing hide-and-seek in a giant parking garage with no cars. Just concrete shadows, ramps, echoes, and the unsettling knowledge that your seeker has perfect night vision and a better vehicle. Still, you're stubborn enough to play. You lead the pony deeper into the rocks, careful where it steps, avoiding another collapse into hidden holes. The path narrows, winding like a lazy serpent, and the sound of the whistles fades behind you, swallowed by stone. For the first time tonight, the horizon disappears. The steppe is hidden, replaced by close walls and a ceiling of stars framed like a narrow window above. It feels both safer and more claustrophobic, a paradox you decide not to analyze too hard. Mainstream fact again, Mongol tactics often faltered in mountain terrain. Chroniclers note that in steep passes and rocky landscapes their cavalry lost its edge. Infantry-heavy forces, usually dismissed by steppe riders, suddenly had the upper hand. You're not an army, but you take comfort in knowing this terrain might be levelling the field, even if only slightly. Another quirky tidbit, some Mongol shamans believed rocky outcrops and cliffs were inhabited by mountain spirits, beings to be respected with offerings. Travellers sometimes left tokens, coins, bits of food, even tufts of hair at cairns built near passes. You check your pouch. No coins, little food. Still you pluck a few strands of your hair, knot them quickly, and place them on a flat stone. A bargain with unseen landlords. If nothing else, it gives you the strange comfort of tradition, and the steppe accepts even clumsy prayers. You press onward, weaving deeper, the rocks echoing each step in miniature. Behind you, the whistles don't return. Either the riders have lost your trail or they've chosen patience over pursuit. Both possibilities are dangerous, but at least silence buys you another hour. You lean against a boulder, catch your breath, and close your eyes. The pony nibbles at a tuft of grass growing from a crack, chewing calmly, as if the world isn't ending. And for one fragile moment you let yourself believe you've shaken them. Just one moment of stillness, but stillness has its price. Because when you open your eyes again, the stars have shifted, and in that new alignment, you notice a faint glow on the ridge opposite. Not a campfire's flicker, not a star. It's a lantern moving slowly, deliberately tracing the path of someone who knows this maze of rocks better than you ever could. The glow moves with the confidence of someone who owns the dark. It isn't the erratic sputter of a flame caught in wind. It's steady, controlled, shielded in a way that keeps it purposeful. You crouch lower against the rock, pulling the pony closer, feeling its breath warm against your ear. Its ears prick forward, then swivel back, mirroring your own confusion part, curiosity part, dread. You whisper a soft hush, though the sound barely makes it past your throat. Your heart is louder than your voice anyway, drumming against the stone as though it wants to betray you. The lantern bobs once pauses, then continues. Whoever carries it is not in a hurry, not stumbling like someone lost, not calling out like someone searching for friends. No, this is deliberate movement, a patroller scout, or perhaps someone like you caught in the endless cat and mouse of the steppe at night. But that feels too much like wishful thinking. In stories, fugitives rarely meet other fugitives. More often, they meet the hunter. Mainstream fact, Mongol scouts often carried small lanterns or covered torches when navigating rocky terrain at night. Unlike the grand bonfires of camps, these were practical tools light enough to see a path dim enough not to betray distance. Reports from envoys describe patrols who could slip through ravines with shielded lamps, their glow so faint it resembled a firefly. It's one thing to read about it in a chronicle. It's another thing to watch the page come alive across from you. Quirky tidbit in some nomadic households, lanterns were fashioned from dried gourds, hollowed and pierced with tiny holes creating patterns of stars when lit. Children loved them, chasing the dots across yurt walls like constellations within arm's reach. For a split second you imagine that the glow across the ridge isn't a hunter at all, but some child's bedtime lantern lost and wandering the rocks. It's a gentle image, and therefore unlikely tonight. Historians still argue about whether Mongol patrols at night preferred silence or intimidation. Some say they moved without light, without words, letting their horses feel the ground as if blind. Others insist they used lanterns like lures, coaxing the desperate into revealing themselves. You'd happily join that debate another time, perhaps in a warm library with a cup of tea. Tonight you're the footnote in the argument, and the citation is approaching. The pony shifts uneasily, and you realize its hide is damp with sweat despite the cold air. You stroke its neck, steadying it, but the animal knows what you're only starting to accept: hiding here forever isn't possible. The lantern is tracing the ridge with deliberate patience, moving closer with each pause, each cautious step. If you wait, the glow will crest the rocks above you, and then there will be nowhere left to shrink. You test your options. To the right, the ravine narrows, walls crowding until the space becomes a slot too tight for horse or human. To the left, the rocks thin, giving way back to open steppe, where whistles could pin you in seconds. Ahead, a tangle of boulders rises like broken teeth, jagged, uneven, but offering cover and complexity. Behind the path you came from, which surely carries the scent of your passing. The lantern is between you and the pass now. Forward then. Always forward. You tug the pony gently and begin climbing the jagged rocks. Each step is deliberate, placed where stone meets stone, where your boots won't dislodge a loose pebble to betray you. The pony follows, surprisingly nimble, its hooves clicking softly but not sliding. Its trust in you feels undeserved, but you accept it anyway. Together you weave upward into the maze, hearts synchronized in quiet urgency. The rocks change the soundscape. The wind, once steady, is now broken into pockets. One gust sings high between two narrow spires. Another growls low as it tumbles into a hollow. It's disorienting, and for a moment you lose track of where the lantern's glow should be. You pause, pressing yourself against a boulder, breathing through your mouth to keep silence. Then you see it again, higher now, almost level with your climb. Whoever carries it is patient, reading the terrain like scripture. A modern aside intrudes because your brain insists on humour when terror would be too heavy. This is like sneaking upstairs at night while holding a bag of potato chips, praying the bag doesn't crinkle. Except the person waiting at the top of the stairs is carrying a bow. You nearly laugh, but the sound would echo in these stones like a confession shouted through a megaphone. You edge around a jagged ridge and find a narrow shelf. Here the grass grows thin between the stones, and the ground smells faintly of old rain trapped in crevices. You let the pony rest a moment, rubbing its muzzle, whispering gratitude. Its sides rise and fall warm against your arm. You realize how much of your survival tonight belongs not to your wit, but to this creature's patience. A reminder, Mongols measured wealth, not just in gold or goods, but in horses. A horse was survival status strategy. Tonight it is your only ally. Mainstream detail to tuck in your memory. Mongol horses were so sturdy they could survive on snow alone, scraping it aside to find grass in winter. Riders often said their mounts were half wild, half miracle. You feel a sliver of that miracle now. If this pony hadn't let you climb on earlier, you'd still be crawling the steppe on hands and knees, easy prey for the men with whistles. Quirky tidbit again, some nomadic shamans claimed horses could sense spirits better than humans. When a horse balked or refused to cross a place, people listened. You glance at your pony, noting the twitch of its ears, the way it flicks its head toward the ridge where the lantern glows. Is it sensing spirits? Or just men with weapons? Either way, you decide to listen. The lantern pauses. For a long moment it doesn't move. You imagine the figure holding it is also listening, sniffing the wind, searching the dark for the shape of your breathing. The stillness grows unbearable. Even the pony seems to hold its breath. Then slowly the glow shifts, descending along another ridge as if the bearer has chosen a different path. Relief flares in your chest, bright as lightning. But relief is fragile, because when you turn back to the shelf, you notice something you hadn't before carved into the stone. Are small piles of rock stacked deliberately, each topped with shards of bone or tufts of wool. Cairns, offerings, signs of travellers who mark this place with reverence or warning. You kneel, touch one, feel the smoothness of bones weathered by years of wind. Some are animal skull fragments, others just horns. A chill moves through you. You're not just in a rocky maze, you're in someone's shrine, and shrines have watchers, whether human spirit or both. The pony snorts softly, ears pinned. You look up again, and though the lantern has disappeared, the air feels heavier, as if the rocks themselves are aware of you now. You've traded the wide-open chase for something older, stranger, and the next step will tell you whether you've entered sanctuary or trap. You study the cairns with the puzzled respect you reserve for other people's calendars, clearly important, clearly organised, and clearly able to ruin your week if misread. Stones stacked 3 high, 5 high, some crowned with horn chips, others looped with a faded strip of blue cloth that the wind worries like an old bookmark. The pony's ears can't back then forward. Its breath thickens warm and hay-sour, making a small cloud that clings to the rock before the breeze steals it. You set your palm to a cairn's sun-cold top. The roughness bites skin, but the sensation is grounding, a tactile signature that declares people pass here and they remember to say please. You think of the yurt's dangling scarf and feel the invisible thread between house and hill. On the steppe, even the empty places have manners. Mainstream fact to steady your step in this shrine of stone travellers across Mongolia, and the wider steppes still build and visit Ovu's cairns that are part landmark, part altar. Custom says circle them 3 times, clockwise add a stone or stick, and sometimes pour a libation milk tea or a splash of vodka so that spirits of place and sky keep the road friendly. The Ovu is at once practical and cosmological, a compass rose with a pulse. You haven't got milk to pour and you're fresh out of vodka tragedy, but you do have the small apple tithe you paid to the camel folk, a habit of reciprocity you're not in the mood to break. A quirky tidbit tumbles in like a pebble from the ridge. Some families tuck little candies or sweet curds under an Ovu's edge for children human and not so human to find. Others wedge tiny carved horses into crevices, and there are stories, half-smile kind of foxes and crows that learned which piles pay out. If tonight's guardians prefer sugar to trespassers, you wish you had confections to bribe them. You have only breath and borrowed courage. The scholarly debate peeks over your shoulder like a nosy cousin. Do Ovus originate in deep pre-Buddhist shamanic practice, sky worship, and mountain spirits? Or are they primarily a Buddhist-era syncretism, folded into new ritual logics once monasteries and lamas threaded the plains? Historians make careful diagrams. Herders make careful circles. You don't resolve the centuries, you just step softly because regardless of ancestry, rocks hold memory and memory can be noisy. You touch your forehead, then heart, then the cairns flank your clumsy trinity of apology, and place 3 pebbles you've warmed in your glove. The pony watches unimpressed but tolerant, as if you've marked the attendance sheet at a meeting it considers optional. The wind purls through the notch above like a tone flute, and you wonder if the lantern bearer across the way is doing their own quiet circuit, or simply choosing a path that makes your spine itch. Light has a way of telling time. The lantern's glow has vanished, but the horizon is loosening from black to ink, then to the faintest brush of graphite. Dawn is negotiating. You feel it on your skin first, the air less brittle, the wind heavier, as if the night's pages are thicker near the end of the chapter. Dawn is beautiful in paintings. In chases, it's an auditor with a clipboard. Shadows will shrink. Tracks will wake. You tug the rawhide loop. The pony follows. Together you thread the cairnfield feet, finding the lichened seams where rock is less eager to skitter. On one shoulder, the ridge leans in, freckled with tufts of stubborn grass. On the other, the ground falls away to a pocket valley that could hide a village if a village could live on moonlight. The bells from the camel camp are long gone, replaced by a different sound, the distant breathy hoot of wind, around a freestanding pillar of stone farther upslope. It hoots again on a lower note like a sleepy ox practicing scales. Not ominous, just geography humming to itself. You let the sound be your cover and move. Whenever the pillar sings, you shift. When it rests, you rest. A silly choreography perhaps, but it keeps your footfalls inside a larger music. And if the steppe is doing ASMR tonight, you're willing to subscribe. The pony's earlier mishap has made you cautious on soft ground. You test with your heel before committing weight, deferring to rock when possible. The ridge path narrows into a ledge that pitches you towards sky on the left and toward a ragged tumble on the right. You turn your body sideways, crab walking, keeping the pony's shoulder close to the wall. It trusts you with the foolish optimism horses use on humans. Twice its hoof scrape sparks. Twice your stomach recreates the sensation of falling without the courtesy of movement. You whisper a joke you can barely stand to hear 5 stars if we survive. Would not recommend otherwise, and the pony snorts like a reviewer with notes. When the ledge widens again, you press knuckles to rock and let the tremble flow out. The air brings news, leather faint, smoke fainter, the clean metal of water on stone. The last smell you follow like a parishioner follows incense. Around a finger of cliff the sound confirms it, a thin silver noise of trickle hidden in shadow. You find it tucked into a seam no wider than your palm, a tiny rill grinding away at the mountain's patience. You wet your fingers, and your lips share a handful with the pony, then do the irresponsible thing and wash grit from your eyes. It stings like waking up. You thank the seam out loud and hope the spirits appreciate flattery. Mainstream fact to pin on this moment, like a badge in broken terrain, even nomad cavalry must dismount. Horses can scramble, but mounted archers become footmen here, and their great advantage momentum dissolves into method. Mongol chronicles admit as much. Between the lines, past warfare needed different tools. You have no army, no shield wall, but you do have narrowness, and narrowness is a technology you can actually operate. Another quirky tidbit, because your brain is a magpie, even in peril, some ovus double as weather stations in folk memory. If the scarf snaps hard, expect guests. If it hangs damp, stay put. If it vanishes entirely, we'll tie another and stop asking silly questions. The faded blue strip above you flutters in a steady pulse. Guess then, or pursuers, in either language movement. You edge along until the ledge becomes a staircase of slabs. The pony tests each step, snorting in small punctuation marks. The sky lightens another degree, a smudge of pewter, where the world plans to keep its sun. With light comes sight, and with sight certainty. You risk a look back down the valley. The plain is a spilled sheet, and on its hem you make out 3, perhaps 4 ant-sized riders, where darkness thins. Not a lantern among them now. Dawn is their lamp. You calculate a tired clerk doing math on a shaking table. If they climb where you climbed, you can stay ahead in the churn of rocks. But if they fan out and pin your exit ridges, you'll end in an argument with gravity. Your best hope is a traverse across the face to a different gully drop into a fold the riders can't see from below, then ride the backside of the ridge like a rumour that refuses to be verified. You point the pony's nose at a diagonal seam and begin. Each yard costs you a prayer you didn't know you had left. The wind has grown meddlesome again, no longer the friend who covered sound, but the aunt who rearranges your furniture. It pushes your cloak in the wrong direction, tries to turn your pony into a weather vane. You wrestle it into cooperation with small corrections, a breath orchestra, of easy, and the promise of future grass. The pony files a complaint but complies. Halfway across the traverse you stop dead. A fresh set of prints cuts your path, hoof crescents, yes, but human too. 2 different boot sizes angled downhill. The edges are knife clean, and a smear of moisture darkens one toe mark as if someone paused here recently to lean and look. You crouch fingertips just above the sign and feel the air where a body was. No warmth now, but the sense of recentness is unmistakable, like reading yesterday's note in a familiar hand. Out for a patrol, back soon. Historians would argue later whether this constitutes evidence of a forward-screen advance scouts meant to smell you out of the rocks, or simply neighbours who use the same shrine for ordinary dawn routines. The steppe keeps civilians and soldiers in the same cupboard sometimes. It makes sorting difficult. You don't get to footnote it, you get to choose a direction. Left your nerves say, write your ankles counter. The pony votes for down, which is not on the ballot. You pick right into a tighter seam where the rock ribs interlock, making a cramped hallway laced with shadows. It feels like squeezing behind a theatre curtain while the audience murmurs, waiting for someone else's play to begin. You make 10 cautious steps, 20, the hallway bending like a parenthetical thought. The wind drops out entirely as if someone closed a door behind you. You're hearing blooms to fill the vacuum, your breath. The pony's breath a drip, a distant clink, not yours, then silence again. The floor texture changes underfoot, less grit, more sifted dust, and your boot prints stamp crisply, scandalously, like signatures on a petition. You curse gently and try to step in your own steps, a self-echo you cannot maintain forever. At the bend's end, the seam opens into a pocket the size of a chapel roof. Low, one wall split by a vertical crack where the morning's first idea of light is gathering. On the floor, nestled against the crack, sits an object you didn't expect in a place like this, a little clay lamp cold, its wick stiff with old ash. Beside it, a shallow wooden bowl holding 3 things, dried juniper twigs, a twist of hardened butter, and a blue silk strip tied in a loop. An altar kit neatly arranged as if the mountains themselves have been carrying travel-sized devotion. You inhale and the air tastes faintly of things burned and forgiven. Your hand reaches, then stops. You're not the owner. You're not even an invited guest. But you are a person trying to live, and the kit is a conversation someone meant to have with this ridge at dawn. You could borrow the conversation. You could light the lamp charm the morning asked the rocks to misplace you. You could also light your location like a polite announcement. The pony lifts its head ears, pricking toward the crack of light. Outside, faint but certain now hoofstone sings careful ascending plural. You balance the lamp in your palm thumb on the cold wick and think hospitality versus hiding blessing versus beacon. Then the wind returns in a thin thread through the crack and carries just barely a human breath that is not yours. Someone is at the other side of the light. The breath is so faint you almost convince yourself it's the wind again. But no, the rhythm is human, uneven, carrying the weight of lungs. You freeze with the lamp in your hand, its clay edges cold against your palm. The pony flicks its ears, muscles tightening under its hide like wires under tension. Its nostrils flare once, then it falls silent as though the animal also knows you're being listened to. You crouch lower, setting the lamp gently back into its niche beside the juniper twigs and silk strip. Every sound seems magnified in this pocket of stone, the scrape of your boot, the sigh of fabric, even your pulse drumming against your eardrums. You try to match your breathing with the pony's slower rhythm, hoping to dissolve into its presence, just another shadow behind its larger one. The crack of light widens slightly as a figure shifts outside. You see not the whole person, just fragments, a shoulder wrapped in felt, the edge of a bow, a hand steady against rock. They stand still, peering in through the narrow slit, perhaps sensing the warmth of living bodies hidden inside. The silence between you stretches long and taut, a rope neither side wants to cut first. Mainstream fact to anchor you. Mongol archers could shoot accurately from horseback even at night using the faint silhouettes of enemies against starlight. But when on foot they were even deadlier. Bows braced properly, shots, steadier arrows, faster. The chronicles describe scouts who could hit a rabbit at full sprint, and you're far larger than a rabbit. A quirky tidbit creeps in to remind you of the absurd some steppe hunters believed whistling at night could summon spirits that tangled the paths of men. Children were warned not to whistle after dark lest invisible presences follow them home, and yet here you are stalked by whistles that are very much human. You wonder briefly if the old superstition still holds. Maybe the patrol has spirits on their side too, though you prefer they didn't. Historians still debate whether Mongol scouts travelled alone or always in pairs. Some accounts insist on the buddy system, 2 scouts, 1 to observe, 1 to report. Others claim single riders often ranged ahead invisible and confident, weaving into the dark like solitary wolves. You cannot see anyone else beyond that crack, but your skin insists that if there's one, there's another. There is always another. The pony stamps once softly, and the sound reverberates like a drumbeat through the chamber. The figure outside stiffens, their shadow pauses, then a faint scrape of boot against a rock retreat or reposition you can't tell. The crack dims as the silhouette shifts away, leaving behind only the smear of growing dawn. Relief stirs in your chest, fragile, but you don't let it bloom. Riders are patient. Shadows are patient. You can't stay here. You rise slowly, placing one hand on the pony's mane, grounding yourself. The little altar kit glows faintly in the growing light, as if it wants to remind you this place belongs to older forces than the men outside. You bow your head, once half thanks, half apology, and turn toward the darker side of the chamber. A narrow passage snakes upward, barely wide enough for horse and human to squeeze through. Stones scrape your shoulders, dust fills your nose. You coax the pony along inch by inch, whispering nonsense comforts. Each step upward feels like a birth pushing out of the womb of the earth toward the risks of light. And then suddenly you emerge onto a ledge high above the plain. The dawn has begun to spill across the steppe, painting the grass in bands of silver and pale gold. From here you see farther than you wish, tiny figures dotting the lower ridges, mounted riders fanning out like ink bleeding into paper. They look small, almost harmless from this height, but you know better. Your sanctuary of stone has given you time, not freedom. The chase isn't over. You swing into the pony's back, gripping main body low. It's not speed you need now, but cunning. Somewhere in this broken country lies a fold, deep enough a path hidden enough to trick even the most patient hunters. But dawn strips away shadows, and as the sun pushes higher, you feel the rocks themselves losing their secrecy. Your best chance lies ahead beyond the ridge, and what waits there may decide whether you live as a fugitive or end as another forgotten story swallowed by the steppe. The crack of dawn spreads wider now, its pale fingers tugging shadows out of their hiding places. From your perch, high on the ridge, the steppe looks both breathtaking and unforgiving, an ocean of silver grass, every ripple betraying motion. The riders below are easier to see in this growing light, small dark figures, four at least fanning apart like ink stains seeping across cloth. They don't rush, that's the worst part. They know time and terrain are on their side. You feel like a chess piece being nudged forward while your opponent contemplates 10 moves ahead. You press your back to the stone, holding the pony close. Its breath fogs the cool morning ears, flicking nervously at each sound. The scrape of hooves, the whistle of wind through narrow gullies, the faint grind of rock sliding somewhere far off. You try to steady your breathing, syncing it with the animals. But the truth is, no matter how calm you appear, you're outnumbered, outpaced, and nearly out of luck. Mainstream fact to weigh your fear against Mongol armies famously coordinated entire divisions using horns, flags, and smoke signals. Scouts fanned out like spider legs, each relaying back to a central commander. Pursuits weren't just a chase, they were a moving net, each thread woven tighter with every signal. If the patrol below is following that pattern, then the net is already half closed around you. Your only advantage lies in the rocks, the one environment horses dislike more than hungry wolves. A quirky tidbit wanders into your head uninvited, but oddly timely medieval travellers sometimes claimed you could trick pursuers by leaving scraps of food on rocks. Wolves, they said, might stop to sniff, and even horses might shy from strange scents. Some even suggested smearing sour curds on saddles to spook the mounts. It sounds ridiculous, but tonight, or rather this fragile morning, you can't dismiss even absurd strategies. You glance at the last apple in your pouch, consider it, and wonder if bribing the steppes, gossiping winds with fruit is a worthwhile gamble. Historians still argue whether Mongol patrols prefer to kill or capture fugitives. Some chronicles emphasize interrogation intelligence gathering. Others focus on ruthless efficiency, leaving no witnesses. The truth likely varied with context. Sometimes a captured prisoner was useful. Sometimes a swift arrow was simpler. Your own fate hangs in that ambiguity. Are you prey to be studied, or just another shadow to erase? That unanswered question sharpens every step. The pony nudges your shoulder, restless. You guide it into a narrow cut between boulders, the rock pressing close on either side. The air here smells different, damp, mineral-rich, faintly of lichen and moss. Water has worked at these stones for centuries, carving gullies that now serve as your shield. The path is treacherous, twisting upward before curling down again, but each turn hides you from the plain. You whisper to yourself, half prayer, half joke, "Congratulations, you've unlocked the mountain level." A shaft of sunlight finally breaks over the horizon, spilling gold into the ravine. It dazzles your eyes for a moment, and in that brightness you almost miss it, a faint rhythmic sound ahead and above. Not hooves, not whistles. Something wooden knocking lightly against stone. You pause, listen harder. It repeats tap, scrape, tap. You move forward cautiously, the pony's hooves muffled by sand and gravel, until you round a bend. There, tucked against the rocks, you see what made the noise a crude ladder, its rungs carved from raw branches wedged into a crevice. Above it, faint smoke drifts from another ledge, curling lazily against the dawn. Someone has made camp up there. Not riders, you think. It doesn't feel military. The ladder is too clumsy, the smoke too careless. Perhaps hunters, perhaps herders, perhaps if fortune hasn't deserted you entirely, potential allies. But caution reminds you of the obvious allies and enemies sometimes share the same breakfast fire. Whoever built that camp might trade you water and bread, or they might trade you for a pat on the back from your pursuers. You hesitate, gripping the rawhide loop, feeling the pony's breath on your arm. The smoke drifts again, carrying with it the faint scent of milk boiling. The smell is so painfully human, ordinary, domestic that it almost undoes you. After a night of whistles, hoofbeats, and fear, the idea of milk simmering in a pot feels like a dream. The pony shifts ears, pricked toward the smoke. The world holds its breath. You know you must decide, risk climbing toward strangers, or keep skirting the rocks until exhaustion becomes your only company. And just as you weigh that choice, a voice drifts down from above. Calm, measured in a language you don't quite understand, but the tone is unmistakable. Someone knows you're there. The voice is low, steady, neither alarmed nor welcoming. A few syllables tumble down the rocks like loose gravel, foreign to your ears, but weighted with the cadence of a greeting or perhaps a command. You freeze, hand tightening on the pony's rawhide loop, as if that scrap of leather could anchor you against whatever is about to unfold. The pony flicks its tail and stamps once unimpressed by human subtleties. Above, the smoke continues to curl, fragrant with milk and something grainy porridge, maybe millet, maybe barley. The ordinariness of the smell almost hurts. After hours of chasing shadows and listening for whistles, the idea that someone could be calmly stirring a pot at dawn feels like a joke at your expense. You shift your weight, peer up at the ledge. The crude ladder looks sturdy enough for a climb, though you can't imagine coaxing the pony up its rungs. If you ascend, you'd be leaving your only ally behind, tethered and exposed. But staying below silent means you've already been spotted, and ignoring a voice on the step carries its own risks. Hospitality is a law here, but so is suspicion. Mainstream fact travellers across the Mongol Empire often depended on the kindness of strangers in yurts and camps. Hospitality was both survival and status. To refuse a guest could invite shame or worse retribution from spirits believed to guard the land. Yet at the same time, harbouring an enemy could endanger one's entire clan. The balance was delicate, and many accounts show hosts weighing generosity against danger with each visitor. You're about to become part of that equation whether you want to or not. Quirky tidbit, some travellers reported that hosts tested strangers with bowls of salted milk tea. The way you drank, the way you held the bowl, even how quickly you drained it, could be interpreted as signs of honesty, strength, or ill intent. A man who sipped cautiously might be judged untrustworthy. One who gulped too fast could be considered rude. It was a social exam disguised as breakfast. You swallow at the thought you're parched, but could your thirst betray you? Historians still argue whether fugitives could realistically slip into the fabric of nomadic life without being noticed. Some argue yes, the empire was vast, full of clans and caravans with shifting loyalties, and strangers weren't unusual. Others argue no steppe society was tightly knit, and a new face was as conspicuous as a comet in a cloudless sky. You hope the truth lies somewhere in the forgiving middle, where a tired traveller might simply be mistaken for another tired traveller. The voice calls again, sharper this time, a question hanging in the air. You glance back over the ridge. Riders are still visible now, more distinct in the light. They're not galloping yet, but their measured pace is worse. It's the pace of inevitability. Decision presses in. You murmur to the pony, tie its line to a rock outcrop, and place a calming hand on its flank. Stay, you whisper, as if it speaks your tongue. The animal rolls one eye at you, doubtful, but settles with a low huff. Then you turn to the ladder. Each rung creaks under your weight, but holds. The smell of milk thickens, joined now by the faint tang of smoke-blackened pot. At the top, you pull yourself over the edge and find a small alcove, a hollowed ledge shielded from wind with a crude hearth, built from stacked stones. And there, seated cross-legged by the fire, is the source of the voice, an older man face lined like the land itself, wrapped in layers of felt patched with leather. His eyes narrow as he studies you, neither surprised nor frightened, simply evaluating. Beside him, A steaming pot rests over the coals. He gestures toward it, speaks again, softer now. The words are still foreign, but the meaning is clear enough. Sit, drink, explain. The warmth of the fire licks at your frozen nerves. The smell of milk makes your throat ache with hunger. But trust is as dangerous as thirst. You hesitate at the threshold, knowing that every choice silent speech, acceptance refusal, could carry you closer to survival or betrayal. And as you weigh the risk, the sound of hooves drifts faintly upward from below. The riders are climbing too. Time is running out. The voice above repeats itself quieter now, as if the speaker knows exactly how far sound can travel in these rocks. You catch only fragments, syllables slipping into the breeze like stones into water. You cannot grasp the words, but the cadence is patient, not alarmed. That patience unnerves you more than shouting ever could. The pony shifts against the rawhide tether, restless. Its ears flick forward, then back, trying to decide whether the unseen human above is a friend or a predator. You run your hand along its mane to steady it. Your fingers shake, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that every choice feels weighted like dice loaded by someone else's hand. The figure's outline wavers against the growing light. You can't see much, just a shadow framed in the narrow crack where dawn seeps in. One arm moves, a gesture perhaps, then silence. The smoke above curls again, carrying that maddeningly ordinary scent of boiling milk. Your stomach betrays you with a groan. Mainstream fact in Mongol. Custom even strangers could sometimes expect hospitality, but it wasn't unconditional. Steppe hosts often tested visitors by questions, by ritual drink, even by simple observation. Did you bow correctly? Did you avoid stepping on the threshold? Did you take the offered cup with both hands? These little signs revealed if you knew the ways of the land, or if you were an outsider fumbling at its edges. Tonight, or rather this dawn, you're most certainly the latter. Quirky tidbit, Marco Polo once wrote that Mongols considered salt in tea unlucky, while others insisted it was the preferred taste of the steppes. Historians still puzzle over this contradiction. You imagine sitting in front of the old man above handed a steaming bowl and offending him immediately by drinking wrong, gulping too fast or grimacing at the taste. Maybe you'd be undone not by arrows but by etiquette. Death by tea. A strangely cosy way to go. The scholarly debate persists in your mind, were patrols allowed to harm fugitives if they found them inside another's yurt or camp. Some accounts insist hospitality was inviolable, once admitted you were safe at least for a night. Others argue exceptions were made for criminals or enemies of the Khan. The line between guest and captive was thin, shifting with politics and circumstance. You're standing on that knife edge now, wondering how a single stranger with a pot of milk will define you. The pony nickers softly and the sound seems to travel farther than it should. You glance back across the plain. The riders are still there now, clearly visible against the swelling light of dawn. Tiny figures, yes, but moving with that awful measured certainty. They haven't seen you yet, or perhaps they have, and they're just waiting for you to make the wrong move. You weigh your choices, climb the ladder, face the man-trust in whatever hospitality the steppe might grant, or slip sideways deeper into the rocks where the maze might still shield you. Both paths glimmer with danger. Both are narrowing by the second. The voice calls again, softer than before. This time the tone is unmistakable, not command, not suspicion, but invitation. A hand gestures once, palm open. The meaning is clear. You step forward, and at that exact moment a whistle pierces the air from below. Sharp rising, answered almost immediately by another. The riders have begun to close the net. The whistle slices the dawn in two sharp and rising like a blade whistling past your ear. The answering call comes from farther away, lower in pitch, a sound that carries authority even across the empty valley. The steppe suddenly feels smaller, as if the sky itself has leaned closer to listen. The pony stiffens under your hand muscles, bunching tail, snapping once in agitation. Its instincts know what your mind confirms. The hunters are moving in concert now. The figure above the crack does not flinch. The shadow's outline holds steady, and then the voice returns a short phrase spoken firmly, almost impatiently. A hand emerges into the shaft of light, broad-weathered, empty of weapon. The palm tilts upward once, twice. The universal gesture, come. You hesitate. Your survival has been a sequence of hesitations strung together like mismatched beads. But hesitation cannot outrun horses. You untie the rawhide loop, with shaking fingers squeeze the pony's muzzle in a brief apology, and guide it toward the crude ladder. The animal balks as you expected, so you tie it again to a sturdy rock spur close enough that you could descend fast if needed. You murmur to it, promising nonsense comforts. Grasswater fewer bad decisions soon. It snorts unimpressed. Then you climb. Each rung creaks under your weight, the ladder swaying in a rhythm that makes your stomach lurch. Above the scent of boiling milk thickens, carrying with it a sweetness that nearly breaks your resolve. At the top, hands grip your forearms firm, not violent, and haul you onto the ledge. You stagger dust clinging to your cloak and find yourself face to face with the old man. His face is carved by timelines etched deep around eyes that neither welcome nor condemn. He studies you in silence for a moment, then gestures to the fire. The pot of milk tea bubbles softly, froth hissing at the rim. He ladles some into a wooden bowl, holds it out to you. The gesture is simple, direct. A test, perhaps, the oldest one there is, will you accept food when it is offered? Mainstream fact to refuse a host's drink in steppe culture was often considered deeply insulting. Milk tea sute tsai was more than nourishment. It was a sign of peace of recognition. To drink meant you acknowledged the house, the host, and the moment as binding. Even travellers with nothing in common could be bound by that bowl. Your hand trembles as you take it, the steam curling against your face like a second dawn. Quirky tidbits, some chroniclers claimed that Mongol hosts deliberately made the tea salty, watching how strangers reacted. A polite nod, even through a grimace, earned respect. Spitting it out was an invitation to immediate trouble. You lift the bowl sip and the taste hits rich milk laced with salt, not unpleasant, but strange to your tongue. You swallow, suppressing the wince and nod once. The old man's eyes narrow, then soften. He gestures for you to sit. Historians still argue about the line between hospitality and politics on the steppe. Was shelter absolute even for enemies, or could a host bargain away a guest if loyalty to the Khan demanded it? Some accounts insist hosts protected strangers fiercely. Others describe betrayals traded for safety or favour. You sit on the felt mat offered, aware that you are suspended between those two traditions. You are both guest and bargaining chip. The old man speaks again slowly this time, pointing first to you, then toward the valley where the riders advance. His eyes flicker with curiosity. Who are you, and why do they chase you? You cannot answer in words, he understands, so you shake your head, shrug, spread your hands. His gaze lingers on the bow slung across his own knee, then returns to your face. He exhales through his nose, a sound of decision made. Below the whistles come again closer now. The hoofbeats follow a low percussion that climbs the rocks in steady rhythm. The old man rises, sets the pot aside, and pulls a heavy felt cover across the mouth of the alcove. Darkness wraps around you, both thick and muffled. He places one finger to his lips. Silence. The riders arrive soon after. Their voices carry up the stone gullies, sharp clipped. You hear hooves clattering against rock, the scrape of iron-shod boots. A command rings out, followed by the faint jingle of tack. They're searching the ridges, scanning every crack of dawn for the shape of your shadow. You curl inward, clutching the still-warm bowl in your hands, listening to the world tighten its grip. The old man does not move. He is stone-steady patient, as if he has hidden fugitives before, or as if hiding you is no different than hiding his own fire from the wind. And yet when one rider whistles again, this time right outside the alcove, so close you can hear the breath of his horse, you wonder whether even this sanctuary can hold. The whistle outside is so close you feel it in your chest like a reed pipe pressed against your ribs. The pony below answers with a sharp snort, hooves scraping stone. Your blood turns to ice. You clutch the wooden bowl tighter, every muscle in your arms demanding stillness while your mind screams to move. The rider's horse stamps once, then twice. Leather creaks. You hear the metallic jingle of a bit as the animal tosses its head. A voice follows, low questioning. It's not a shout, but the kind of tone one uses when suspicion is already half convinced. The sound of a boot scraping against rock echoes. He's dismounted. He's close. The old man beside you doesn't flinch. He places his hand on your wrist, firm, steady. With the other, he reaches to the hearth, scoops a pinch of the cold ash, and smears it across your cheek and brow. You don't understand until you catch the faint reflection in the clay bowl, your skin dulled, your features shadowed like another stone among stones. A camouflage lesson delivered without words. Mainstream fact steppe dwellers often used ash and soot as simple camouflage or even rudimentary medicine. Hunters smeared ash to mask their scent. Warriors blackened their faces before night raids. Chronicles speak of armies that vanished into the earth. More metaphor than fact, but based on these small tricks of survival. Tonight you are one line in that metaphor. Quirky tidbit, some accounts say children at festivals played ash games smearing each other's faces until they all looked like small ghosts laughing, as if they'd tricked the spirits themselves. You try to imagine laughter in this moment and it nearly breaks you. Still you hold the thought close, maybe laughter is just courage translated into a softer language. Historians debate whether Mongol patrols relied more on sight or sound when searching for fugitives in rough terrain. Some argue vision was paramount their eyesight compared to hawks. Others suggest sound ruled the night the way whistles threaded through darkness like nets. Either way you pray the darkness of the alcove is thicker than their gaze and that silence can do what speed cannot. The rider's boots crunch closer. You can hear him breathing now, hear the faint tug as he pulls his reins. He mutters something sharp, syllables, impatient. Another rider answers from farther down the slope, the voice echoing through stone hollows. Then silence again. A silence you recognize, the silence of someone listening. The old man shifts, picks up a ladle and strikes the side of the pot softly clang-clang. The sound rings out like the most ordinary thing in the world, a herder stirring his morning tea. He mutters loudly, his voice full of casual annoyance, like a man scolding his fire for boiling too slow. The effect is disarming. To the riders outside, the sound is a declaration nothing here but an old man and his breakfast. The rider at the mouth of the alcove huffs, mutters something back, words too clipped to follow, and then the sound of boots retreating follows. The horse stamps again, then the jingle of reins. A whistle sharp calls out. Another answers in the distance. The net is shifting again, moving upward but away from this hollow. You sit frozen until the last hoofbeat fades. Only then does the old man lower the felt cover slightly, letting daylight spill in. He looks at you, eyes dark but not unkind, and nods once as if to say, not yet safe, but safer. The bowl in your hands has cooled the surface of the milk tea skinned over. You sip anyway, the salt sharp on your tongue, and it feels like a contract sealed. Below faint as memory, the riders continue their climb. They will circle, they will not give up. The old man's eyes flicker toward the mountains beyond, then back to you. He jerks his chin once, a silent message. There is another path deeper through the rocks, but it will cost you strength you aren't sure you still have. Your heart steadies. You place the bowl down, carefully rise and meet his gaze. You don't know the words, but you understand the question he isn't asking. Will you keep running? And you know the answer has to be yes. You nod once, yes, you will keep running, and the old man moves with the brisk grace of someone who turns decisions into chores. He draws the felt cover wider, squints into the pale morning and listens until the rock itself seems to answer. Satisfied, he beckons you through a narrow backslit in the alcove, a seam you'd mistaken for a shadow. It is not a shadow. It is a hallway, chiselled by wind and patient water. You squeeze sideways, cloak snagging on stone, the smell of lichen, and old smoke brushing your face like a grandmother's shawl. Behind you, the pony nickers from below. The old man glances at the ladder's lip, clicks his tongue, and shakes his head. No horse up this way. He taps your chest, then points uphill with 2 fingers you first. He'll fetch the animal by another path. The passage kinks upward like a question mark. Your hands learn the rock's grammar, grit here, ledge there, a friendly knob of stone where a friendly doorknob ought to be. At one tight bend you flatten, feeling your heart thump against the wall. The stone thumps back simply because sound is honest here. Above the breeze threads itself through a crack and sings a single silver note. For once the wind feels like a friend again, playing white noise over your clumsy soundtrack. You emerge onto a shelf that peers down into a small pocket of scree and scrub. The old man materializes 2 switchbacks away. How did he get there, leading the pony by your rawhide loop, as if the rocks themselves had offered him a service entrance? The animal looks pleased to be reunited with your questionable leadership. You stroke its face, gratitude rising like warmth, and the old man allows himself one tiny approving grunt, which in this landscape counts as a ceremony. Mainstream fact to tuck behind your ear like a pencil. The Mongol relay the Yam wasn't just a road. It was a web of paths and ledges hidden for speed. Authorized couriers carried Pisa tablets, metal passes stamped with authority that opened doors and gates and yurts. Some stations perched where cavalry could not easily follow, because messages travel differently than armies. Scholars love to map the big arteries. Locals remember the capillaries. This ledge feels like a capillary, narrow essential easily missed. A quirky tidbit sidles in as you begin to traverse among some herding families. Goats are the original trail engineers. People watch where goats go and upgrade the route with 3 rocks and a prayer. You are currently walking a goat's opinion of a road with upgrades 2 cairns, a deliberately placed flat stone, and generous portions of prayer. Your pony strongly agrees with the prayer component. The old man sets a pace that honours knees and favours silence. When the wind whines, you move. When it rests, you rest. He stops once to pluck a twig of juniper from a crack. With an ember coaxed from his pouch, he smokes it gently, letting the thin ribbon curl along the rock. He wafts the smoke over the pony's muzzle and then over your hands. The scent is clean warm, slightly peppery. Purify you, mouth. He gives the smallest shrug that means purify disguise, greet the stones. Why choose just one reason when you can have 3? Historians still argue whether such smudging in the 13th century belonged to older shamanic practice or later Buddhist layers. The debate is tidy on paper and untidy in life. On this ledge it is simply protocol. The juniper's breath folds into the morning. Your scent becomes a rumour rather than a headline, and your nerves remember how to walk in a straight line. You skirt a notch where the world drops away to the left. Far below the steppe has brightened to tarnished silver, and you can count riders now 4, maybe 5, threading the lower ribs. They do not charge. They ascend in a pattern that makes your teeth hurt, 1 on the obvious route 2, flanking 1 lagging to read sign. They are not chasing. They are narrowing choices like accountants of distance. The shelf funnels into a ramp of fractured slabs. You climb in small stitches, pony behind the old man, ghosting ahead. Twice your foot slides. Twice his hand appears a quiet hook that steadies your waist or elbow without making a production of it. You mutter a thank you that comes out as a wheeze. He answers with a look that means breathe through your nose, not through your panic. At a lull in the climb, he presses something into your palm, a strip of blue silk tied in a loop, the twin of the one by the rock lamp. He touches it to his brow, then to yours, then knots it around your wrist with a tug that is half blessing, half leash. You feel silly and fortified at the same time, which is probably the correct dosage. The ledge broadens into a saddle between 2 teeth of stone. Here the wind finds its grand voice. The hoot you heard earlier opens into a low shallow that turns the air to honeyed noise. You and noise become colleagues again. The old man crouches and traces a map in dust with 1 finger, a shallow gully dropping north, a shadowed crease curling east, and a stitched line along the ridge's backside like a seam on a good coat. He taps the seam. You go seamward. A modern aside sneaks in mostly to keep your courage from dissolving. This is like finding the employee exit in a labyrinthine warehouse at 3 a.m, except the night manager is the sky and HR is gravity. You file a complaint. Gravity stamps it received and does nothing. Half a dozen steps later, you hit a patch of powdered dust where the rock has weathered to flour. Your boot prints pop crisp as signatures. You mutter an apology to the surface. The old man shakes his head, stoops, and with a twist of his palm swipes your sign into a general smudge. He then walks backward for 10 paces, placing his feet in yours and his cloak's hem sweeping a meaningless crescent over the scene. A magician's flourish, rural edition. When he's satisfied, the rock is gossiping about no one in particular. You move on. Time lengthens the way it does when you've had not enough sleep and too much consequence. Your breath adopts the pony's tempo. The sensory world simplifies grit under nails, wool against wrist. The juniper's aftertaste, the distant oceanic hush of grass 1,000 feet down. Somewhere to your right, a raven tries a single craw and is instantly ashamed of the acoustics. It declines to repeat the performance. Mainstream fact slips its arm through yours. Feigned retreat made Mongols legendary on flat ground riders, turning, loosing, fleeing, inviting the enemy to chase into a trap. In mountains there is less theatre. Ambush becomes geometry. The ridges decide who is clever. You wonder if below in the chess you can't quite see a feigned retreat is happening at a smaller scale. One rider backing down to pull the others into an easier line while a scout needles the flanks. The thought is too plausible to ignore. You keep the seam head low. A new smell arrives, unmistakable wet stone warmed to a whisper, the breath of a spring. You angle toward it and find a trickle barely larger than your thumb, slipping from a rock lip into a shallow basin someone has patiently carved with a blade. Cup, sip, pass. The old man watches you drink like a physician taking notes, then nods with approval that feels like a gold star. He cups his hands and offers the pony its share. The animal drinks with elegant greed, then flicks a drop at your cheek as a tip. Quirky tidbit for the road, some herders taught their horses to drink by the sound of water alone, whistling a certain rhythm to make the animal lower its head. The old man whistles now a short tune without melody. and the pony obliges as if it has always belonged to him. Maybe in ways that matter, all ponies belong to people who know the tune. The seam bends into a shady throat of rock and opens unexpectedly onto a small terrace, carpeted in thrift and tiny yellow flowers, clinging to life with unreasonable cheer. You stop because beauty has the right of way. The old man allows the pause and even smiles with one corner of his mouth, which must be what passes for applause here. For 10 breaths you are a person, not a problem. Then the terrace ends at a view that sets your stomach swinging below a narrow defile, scrawls like a crack in porcelain, and on its far lip the dust has been recently bothered. You crouch. There they are, hoof crescents and human tread, 2 sets, maybe 3, fresh enough that even the tiny crumble on one edge hasn't flattened. You reach a finger to the sign and hover the way you might hover over a reply you shouldn't send. The old man taps your wrist, do not touch what you cannot unmake. He scans the skyline and stiffens so slightly you would miss it if you weren't borrowing his courage. You follow his gaze. On a distant shoulder of rock just at the borderline where certainty turns to guessing, a speck detaches from the horizon and becomes a rider then too. They're not on your path yet, but they're on a cousin of your path and family's visit. The old man moves. His hand is a metronome now. He points to a slot half hidden by a boulder leaning at an ungenerous angle, a door a goat would call snug. He slips through first and vanishes. You angle the pony's head, breathe apology into its ear and ask for an unreasonable favour. The animal tucks itself like a piece of luggage that understands the assignment. You and pony become geometry, then succeed at it. Inside the slot opens into a cool, lung-like chamber, where sound dies before it can remember itself. You exhale a slow thread. The old man holds up one finger, wait, and then 2 listen. Somewhere beyond the chamber, filtered by stone, comes the faintest sound of bells. Not the camel's scattered chime from the night, but a different rhythm, 2 quick, 1 slow pause. You look at him. He looks at you. His lips press into a line that could mean heard, could mean signal, could mean both. You take a step, careful as a thought you haven't confessed yet. And then, from deeper in the rocks, a shape stirs a human silhouette in the half-dark, smaller than you expected, lifting a hand not in warning but in greeting, followed by a second, taller shadow, whose outline includes the curve of a bow. The smaller silhouette steps into the grey, and a child's face resolves eyes-wide hair in a short, windswept shingle, cheeks smudged with the honest accounting of smoke and dust. They hold a little stick wrapped in blue cloth like it might be a magic wand or, failing that, the world's most earnest bookmark. The taller figure follows, and what you read as the curve of a bow becomes very much a bow, short-limbed, wrapped sinew, glinting faintly where dawn threads the chamber. The archer's posture is calm, not coiled, but the kind of calm that says every option is available. You lift your hands, palms open, and the rock drinks your whisper guest. Just a guest. Maybe a lost one. The old man with you gives a low throat sound, a cousin of a chuckle raised in a strict family, then speaks to the newcomers in that river-syllabled tongue that turns corners without bumping. Words pass among the 3 like small, careful parcels. Your presence, the riders, the pony breathing politely behind your shoulder. The bowhand lowers a fraction. The child peers around you to inspect the pony issues, an approving H&H, then touches their brow with the blue-wrapped stick and taps the pony's cheek as though knighting it for services to chaos. The pony accepts its new title with a blink. A candle flame is coaxed out of a tin like a tame star. The chamber blooms with the faintest honey light, and your nose meets a layering of scents, juniper's ghost lanolin folded into felt stone sweat, and the sweet metal trace of boiled milk lingering in hair and clothes. It's an olfactory lullaby. You almost sway. The child sees it, and with a solemnity that claims centuries presses a small wooden cup into your hands, a mouthful of something warm. You sip. Milk and salt and the tiniest suggestion of butter like the memory of a feast. Your shoulders drop by a finger's width. The bow hand watches this tiny peace treaty settle, and after an assessing heartbeat unstrings the bow. The string sighs. You do too. Mainstream fact tucks itself into the light like a guest on the edge of a cushion. Composite bows like the one now unlaced. With a step's masterpiece woodhorn sinew all glued with hide and fish bladder, recurved to store violence elegantly. In dry climates they were cheerful and strong. In wet they sulked the glue, remembering rivers. Riders nursed them by the fire the way some people nurse violins, daubing oil, avoiding steam telling them secrets. You glance at the belly of the bow and imagine 1,000 deliberate hands, power disguised as housekeeping. A quirky tidbit flips its coin on your tongue as the milk warms your insides. Some steppe families gave children little practice bows that shot padded pellets, or felt-wrapped darts away to make games of caution and aim. The child before you, proud wielder of the blue stick, has the air of an apprentice safety officer. You can almost see the future archer being drafted from this small ritual. Perhaps they will grow into the calm posture now demonstrated beside you, perhaps into something gentler that does not require strings. Either way, someone has been practicing how to stand in a world that moves. Historians still argue whether mountain folk under Mongol umbrellas felt beholden to the yam and the Khan's will in the same way herders of the broad grass did. Some chronicles suggest independence at altitude ridges, gnarled obligations into local arrangements, spirits and stones, negotiated clauses the lowlands never read. Others insist the empire's web reached into every seam when it wanted to. The Pisa tablets glittering up ravines just as loudly as on highways. Your current committee old man archer child feels less tax office and more parish council. They gossip softly with their eyes, then the archer nods once in that decisive way people nod when their mind has already been made for a while. The old man gestures and you catch the drift. The riders will comb the outer ribs. You shall flow beneath. There is a passage not generous but sufficient, a goat's rumour reinforced into human truth. The child is charged with leading, and this pleases them so sharply you fear they might squeal. They don't. They simply set off with the precise gravity of a librarian returning a valuable book. You follow, one hand on the pony's raw hide, the other skimming the cold wall as if reading braille. The rock touches you back, little bites polish, where palms have polished for years, chalk where a pocket of softer stone surrendered to older fingers. The air is cool and damp, gathering your breath into a single ribbon that trails and dissolves. The candle's glow trims corners from darkness rather than conquering it. You move through a world of edges gently erased. The passage narrows, then widens like a careful conversation. At its tightest, you and Pony become two halves of a sentence that absolutely must fit on one line. At its widest, the chamber drops its voice to a whisper and lets you walk normally again. Somewhere above wind plays a long flute in a crack, the note so pure it feels like clean water poured through your ears. You could sleep to that tone file it under Steppe Esma Track 9, if sleeping weren't a synonym for being found. You pause once at a rock window where dawn spills in like cool tea. Far below on the open flank, you abandoned riders are indeed beading along the ribs. Their spacing would please a geometry teacher, one reading sign, two bracketed a fourth, loitering at an angle where escape routes converge. It isn't malice, it's expertise. You thank the window for the news, then retreat back into stone where news takes longer to deliver. The child tilts their head and listens the way new birds listen to sky. A distant tink answers two quick, one slow, the same pattern the old man heard earlier. Heard, or signal, or both. The archer gestures a tiny query. The child replies with a miniature shrug that contains all the scholarship, maybe, probably yes. You suppress a smile and step in time with the sound. Your boots join the bells in a private polyrhythm. Mainstream fact hums again to keep you literate. The Empire's yam stations had standard distances roughly 25 to 40 miles apart, where terrain allowed denser, where the land argued. Horses waited in loops, grooms rotated them, relay riders ate pace for breakfast. But in mountains, those neat pearls on a string tangle, sometimes a station is a single yurt, sometimes an old cave like this, sometimes only a notch in memory. Messengers learned the flavour of each which stream ran sweet, which corner like to roll an ankle where the wind lies, and where it tells you who is behind the next bend. Your guides read this cave like their childhood diary, embarrassed by none of it. A new scent joins the conversation, cold iron and damp leather. The archer pauses and extinguishes the candle with a practice pinch. Darkness folds in close, silky intimate. You stand still, letting your other senses bloom. They're the faintest grit whisper, not your own. A scuff 2 chambers away. Breathing. Not many. Your pony's ears stand like small flags in a cautious breeze. The archer slides forward a shape cut from shadow. A word you don't know flits back to the child who copies it under their breath as if filing vocabulary. The old man rearranges his face into hospitality. You rearrange yours into rock. 2 men drift into view. Not patrol, no uniformity of posture, no crispness of gear. They carry bundles slung on cords, and the slow-tired look of those who have walked starlight into morning. Traders, perhaps. Neighbours more likely. They halt at the sight of your party-taken pony, stranger, bowchild, old man, and perform the mental arithmetic of risk and breakfast. The older of the two makes the sign you've seen at Ovu's touch, to brow, to chest, to air. The archer mirrors, the old man nods, the child tries their best solemnity, and still manages mischief at the corner of the mouth. Introductions occur in the currency that spends everywhere: a swallow of tea, a piece of dried curd, a quiet exchange of who's where. You contribute an apple, last of your luxury, sliced by the archer, with a little knife that should have its own epic. The wedge passes from palm to palm like a treaty. It tastes of travel and relief. Someone laughs once softly at nothing more than the existence of sweetness. Quirky tidbit wanders through like a friendly dog. Some steppe folk played a game of neighbours' roads in winter, quizzing children on which gullies led to which springs, whose goats preferred which shelves, which stones rang when struck. Geography as chorus practice. Watching the child point out turns with the confidence of a junior cartographer, you realise the curriculum remains rigorous. A scholarly debate tickles you even here were these caves and passes part of an unofficial second network, parallel to the imperial yam run by kinship, custom and convenience. Some anthropologists argue yes, a shadow registry of who owes whom a night of safety. Others think that's romantic, insisting on the primacy of formal roots. The archer's eyebrow when a trader mentions the lamb slope path settles. Your vote, parallel systems sing duets. Empires hum the melody. Locals improvise harmony. The traders report with the compact poetry of people who can't afford to waste breath that riders have taken the easier southern notch. A pair of scouts nudge the hawk's perch to the west. The rest? Listening. The word for listening here feels heavier than in your tongue, a verb that includes smell, patience, and reading how dust sits on a boot. The old man glances at you at your blue wrist loop at the pony's steady eye. He nods toward a darker runnel, a seam within the seam. The child lights the candle with a grin that thinks it's smaller than it is. The archer strings their bow again, not tense, just respectful. You move a small fleet in a black river. The stone narrows to a cool throat. Water speaks once, then disappears. Your shoulder brushes a spot polished like glass by decades of fear and decades of safe returns, indistinguishable and equal. The bells, whoever's bells, ghost the air somewhere above, two quick, one slow, as reassuring as a familiar ringtone in a foreign city. Then you feel it underfoot, a tilt downward, steeper, committed. The passage is becoming a slide, not dramatic but persuasive. Your pony balks, then agrees, trusting the child's soft cluck, the archer's quiet breath, the old man's unspectacular certainty. The candle's flame leans in the direction you must go. You lean with it, a pilgrim stapled to momentum. Somewhere behind, far but real, a whistle floats into stone and loses its way. Another answers thinner. The network is still knitting, but rock makes poor thread. You round the last bend of this subterranean sentence, and the world opens its mouth, cool air, a large black doorway to morning, a frame of brush and disorderly daylight. The child squeezes through, first triumphant. The archer's silhouette blooms against the pale. The old man gestures you out, one palm flat, in a benediction your body feels more than understands. You step into the light and stop. Because laid across the narrow ravine beyond, no more than 40 paces downslope, is a rope line hung with little bells, the same two quick, one slow rhythm, wired into hardware stretched knee-high, between two scrub pines, subtle as spider silk, patient as hunger. And somewhere not far a hand you cannot see tests a knot and listens. The bells strung across the ravine sing their quiet rhythm, two quick, one slow, as if the steppe itself has composed a lullaby just for your nerves. But you recognise what this is not music, but trap. Every step toward that line is a confession, every careless stumble a summons. The pony huffs ears pinned, reading the air the way accountants read ledgers, finding debts you'd rather not acknowledge. The old man stiffens his eyes, narrowing as though the rope itself has insulted him. The child gasps a little, tugging the blue stick close to their chest. The archer only lowers his bowstring, taught the gesture less about threat than about readiness. He knows, as you know, that bells on a line are never innocent. They whisper location to ears you cannot see. Mainstream fact, Mongol scouts often use simple trip alarms bells on ropes, pots with pebbles, even bundles of reeds that crackled when disturbed. These were low-tech, high-effect, one misplaced step turned silence into a signal. In a world without radios, such things were better than any messenger. Here the rope is not for decoration. It is a conversation you're not supposed to overhear. Quirky tidbit, some chronicles note that bells weren't only for patrols but for herds. Nomads tied them to goats or sheep to keep track of stragglers in fog or darkness. A rope of bells across a ravine could in theory belong to herders. But this pattern, too quick one slow, feels too deliberate, too human. It's less a lullaby than a password. Historians still argue whether steppe patrols built such elaborate traps for single fugitives. Some scholars insist the Mongols had larger prey to worry about armies, fortresses, rebellions, and would never waste energy hemming in one runaway. Others counter that the empire's discipline relied on consistency. Lose one fugitive today, encourage a dozen tomorrow. Tonight or this morning you are the inconvenient footnote proving the second theory right. The archer points 2 fingers toward the bells, then flicks them sideways, no passage. The old man nods grim. He traces with his finger on the dust an alternate path curling higher into the ridge, longer, harder, but clean of traps. The child frowns clearly, preferring the direct road, but obeys when the archer gives them a look that brooks no argument. You sigh inwardly, because the longer road means more hours spent under a rising sun. And sunlight is not your friend. You step back into the seam of stone. The bells jingle faintly in the wind, mocking you with their rhythm. The pony follows reluctantly, hooves clicking against stone tail, swishing in agitation. The air grows colder as you climb higher, the scent of juniper giving way to the metallic tang of bare rock. Your body aches with the long night, but fear is an effective stimulant. At a turn you glance down. The riders below are smaller now, but their formation is clear, still fanning, still patient. They are not chasing blindly, they are shepherding. The bells are their crook, the gullies their corral. You are the sheep who keeps insisting you're clever. A modern aside intrudes half bitter, half comic. This feels like being funneled by mall security into the employees-only corridor, knowing the camera's already caught you, yet still pretending you have options. Except here the security guards carry bows, and the mall is 3 million square kilometres of grass. The old man signals for silence. You press into the cliff wall, the child mimicking you with exaggerated seriousness. The archer crouches, bow, half-drawn eyes sharp as a hawk's. From below a new sound rises, not whistles this time, but a drumbeat rhythm of hooves, deliberate, coordinated. They're driving something or someone into the bells. You realise with a chill that the trap isn't only for you. Moments later you glimpse movement on the opposite slope, a lone figure scrambling up the rocks, cloak-torn hair wild. They stagger, full rise again, heading straight for the bell line. Whoever they are, they're about to collide with the trap you just avoided. The archer inhales sharply. The old man mutters a word you don't know. The child grips your sleeve. You know what's coming, one misstep, one jingle, and the hunters will turn this quiet dawn into thunder. The bells wait patient as judges, the fugitive stumbles closer, and you realise you have seconds to decide stay hidden, and let fate claim them or act and risk the net tightening around you too. The fugitive below is little more than a silhouette against the slanting dawn-light thin hunched cloak, whipping like a torn sail in the wind. They stumble on loose scree, catch themselves on hands and knees, then surge forward again with the stubborn rhythm of someone who has already decided falling isn't the same as stopping. Each movement brings them closer to the rope strung with bells. You can almost hear the metal tongues eager for their cue. The old man exhales through his nose, the sound flat as stone. The archer's hand tightens on the bowstring, not to aim but to think. The child squeezes your sleeve again, eyes wide and demanding, do something. And you're trapped between 2 futures, one where you stay silent and survive a little longer, and one where you move, intervene, and invite the hunter's ears straight to your hiding place. Mainstream fact to stiffen your spine, steppe alliances were fluid. Clans helped one another 1 month and raided each other the next. Hospitality stretched across lines of blood and politics, but it could also snap without warning. A lone stranger was often at the mercy of whoever found them. To act here could win an ally or cost you everything. Quirky tidbit travellers wrote that sometimes desperate fugitives would deliberately run into bells, hoping the chaos would scatter hunters long enough to slip away in the confusion. It worked about as often as tossing a rock at a thunderstorm. Still, it's a reminder bells don't just signal danger, they also reset the story. Historians debate whether Mongols valued single prisoners much at all. Some sources say captives were questioned, traded, absorbed. Others insist an exhausted fugitive wasn't worth the effort, a loose end tied up with an arrow. If that's true, the figure stumbling toward the bells may have only heartbeats left to live. The thought lodges in your throat like dry bread. You shift testing the options. If you shout, the bells will be irrelevant. Your voice will serve as signal. If you throw a stone, you might startle the fugitive into stopping, but you might also draw attention from the hunters. If you do nothing, the bells will sing and the riders will know exactly where to tighten their net. The archer beside you seems to decide for you. He raises one hand sharp and commanding and releases a short whistle, not the hunter's signal, but a sharp, scolding hiss, the kind herders use on goats. The sound cuts across the ravine. The fugitive jerks their head up, stumbles, sees the line of bells at last. Their eyes widen, face pale, even in dawnlight. They collapse to their knees, chest heaving, then crawl sideways inch by painful inch, skirting beneath an overhang just shy of the trap. The bells do not ring. Relief rushes into you, almost dizzying. The fugitive slumps against the rock head, bowed. For the first time you catch a clearer glimpse, a young woman, hair-matted clothes ragged from flight. She presses a hand to her side, breath ragged, alive but barely. Below the hunters shout. A whistle, sharp, insistent, cuts the morning. They've lost sight of her and suspicion spreads like ink. Hooves drum against stone, scattering echoes. The riders wheel and regroup, their patience thinning. The old man gestures briskly, the meaning obvious, she comes with you. The child is already scrambling down toward her with nimble feet, ignoring your instinctive hiss of warning. The archer covers them with his bow eyes, never leaving the slopes below. You watch as the child grabs the woman's arm and tugs surprisingly strong, guiding her upward toward the narrow seam where you hide. The woman stumbles, nearly collapses again, but somehow she makes it to the chamber. Her eyes meet yours for a fleeting instant, fear, gratitude, exhaustion, all braided together. No words pass. There's no time for them, because outside the riders have stopped shouting. The whistles fall silent. The silence is worse. It means they are listening again, and the bells, patient as judges, are still waiting for their cue. The hush that follows the rider's silence feels like the world holding its breath with two hands. The woman you've pulled into the seam leans against the wall, eyes closed, jaw clenched, a body negotiating with itself. The child presses the blue-wrapped stick to her forearm like a charm that works better when you really mean it. The pony noses your shoulder, asking the sort of practical question only a horse can ask. Are we moving? Or are we pretending not to exist? You stroke its muzzle soon, you promise, which is exactly the kind of reassurance you've been buying on credit all night. The archer studies the bell line again, then kneels and sketches a plan in dust, two paths, neither generous. One switchbacks higher along a mean ledge, longer safer from alarms, but exposed when the sun lifts its head. The other dives down, skirts the bell line beneath a jumble of brush and stone, and exits into a shadowed gully, shorter, darker, riskier in every sense. The old man taps the lower route, then taps his own chest. He and the archer will make a noise elsewhere. You and the child will thread the gap with the woman and pony. He mimes hands, smothering tiny mouths, bells wrapped, clappers pinched. The child grins as if finally allowed to perform a favourite trick. Mainstream fact, Mongol archers sometimes used whistling arrows, heads carved with vents that made a reed-like cry to signal movements and to unnerve enemies. Chinese and Persian sources mention them. Some argue the sound could carry far enough to fool a valley into thinking it had a voice. You watch as the archer lifts a short-limbed bow and fits an arrow with a bulbous perforated head. He does not shoot across the ravine, too obvious. Instead, he points downslope toward a side gully and raises his brows at the old man. The old man nods once. Yes, we invite our listeners to a different story. Quirky tidbit felt is the steppe's universal answer key. Herders pad, saddle trees wrap babies, line boots, muffle pots, and if you're very lucky, silence bells. The child produces a wad of soft smoke-scented felt from somewhere in their tunic. Of course they do, and begins tearing it into thin ribbons with scissor-crisp efficiency. You hold your breath while they slither down to the rope belly flat, a small lizard with a better union. They pinch each clapper with a felt kiss, then tie the kiss with horsehair snagged from a scrub's thorn. Chime by chime, the trap forgets its job. Historians still argue whether single fugitives inspired this level of patience from patrols. Some scholars say resource economy would forbid it. Others point to the Mongol habit of turning even small pursuits into discipline drills. The truth tastes like both practice and punishment, lesson and law. Below where the gully opens, a whistle finally cuts the air sharp, hungry. Time to make good on your debt to movement. The archer draws. The old man murmurs one word. Bless hush release, who knows? And the arrow leaps. Its voice arrives before its body does a thin, eerie keen that threads the rock like a needle. It lands far down slope with a clatter that imitates panic. Echoes volunteer as accomplices. Another whistle answers, hooves turn. For a sweet foolish second you imagine an office of riders refiling your paperwork under elsewhere. Go the old man mouths and you go. You lead the pony into the brush crawl bend, doubled one hand on its cheek to keep its generous head low. The woman hovers on your other side, moving with the careful ferocity of someone who refuses to be carried. The child slips ahead, a blue glowworm of confidence testing each knee-width opening before waving you through. Felt-muzzled bells bump your shoulders, mercifully dumb. A twig snags your cloak. The pony huffs as a burr considers tenancy in its forelock. You breathe with the brush in when it yields out when it insists. Midway the ground slants treacherously. Gravel skitters. You lock your thighs, become ballast, and the pony scent that it is slides 2 hooves width and stops shaking once like a wet dog who has decided to stay professional. You reward it with a scratch where mane meets withers and a whispered promise of grass that sounds luxurious even to your own ears. The woman suppresses a hiss. The child whispers a correction to your foot placement. With the authority of a junior dance instructor, heel here, not there, thank you. Thank. Behind you, the archer looses a second whistler. It dives into another gully and screams like a gull learning opera. Hooves accelerate in the distance. Voices bounce between stone syllables. The old man chooses new noise, with a cook's discernment knocking a loose rock where it will tumble convincingly without confessing who persuaded it. The steppe becomes a soundstage. You and the bells are off script, and for once that's the safest place to be. You clear the rope by inches, the last bell's felt ball brushing your ear with a lover's discretion. On the far side, the gully deepens into a cool throat. Shade collects like coin. You breathe it like a rich person. The child stashes the remaining felt under a rock for some future emergency that hasn't read the calendar yet. The woman sags against the wall, recovers nods, once ready again. Then the gully bends and the world opens just enough to flash you a postcard of your problem. 3 riders cresting a distant lip, small but decisive angling, not toward your decoy, but toward the seam you're in. Perhaps a guess, perhaps a rumour smelled in dust. Their ponies pick their steps with professional disdain. They aren't coming fast, they're coming correctly. You push on. The seam spills into a stony apron that tips toward a shallow saddle, and beyond that, Oh Mercy Land drops into a long soft valley stitched with darker lines of water and brush. Running room. The pony feels it too. Its neck lifts ears forward, body collecting itself into possibility. Your heart executes an involuntary cartwheel that your legs must now cash. Mainstream fact to keep your optimism tethered, steppe horses excel at distance more than bursts. A steady canter will eat horizons while pride eats itself. The Mongols treated speed as a budget, not a cure. You will have to do the same. If you sprint now, you'll feed your pursuers your fatigue for breakfast. If you pace, you might just turn dawn into a long afternoon of not yet. A last quirky tidbit before the plunge, some bootmakers curved Mongol toes upward. Not just for stirrups, the story goes, but to avoid scuffing sacred earth. A reminder that moving and respecting are not enemies. You aim to place your own feet that way, even as you prepare to abuse both gravity and etiquette. The old man and archer reappear at your shoulder as if they never risked anything at all. The archer scans the saddle's edges, then points to a darker tongue of earth, a faint animal path that will keep hooves sure and noise boring. He touches the woman's arm, weighs her with his eyes, then looks at the pony, then at you 2 riders on one bare back, or one rides, one runs, and switch, before joints lodge formal complaints. You choose honesty over heroics. The woman swings up behind you, and together you become a problem set the pony graciously accepts, on the understanding that hay will be provided later. The child beams at being trusted with a grown root, then immediately pulls a face at the responsibility, and tucks the blue stick into their belt like paperwork. The old man taps your blue wrist loop once, a portable blessing. The archer points to the saddle to the far valley, then lifts 2 fingers, 2 changes of pace, not 3. He pantomimes a long exhale. Pace is prayer. You nudge the pony. It steps into a careful trot, then when the ground widens into that rolling steppe canter that feels like being rocked by a large competent cradle. Wind climbs into your cloak and becomes a friend again, a hand on your back instead of in your face. The woman's grip tightens around your waist. You feel the small tremors of exhausted muscles recalibrating. The child and old man keep to the stones on foot at first, then cut across to a goat lane that rejoins your line farther on. The archer brings up the rear with infuriating ease, his bow an afterthought carrying a person. The saddle crests and the valley spills like poured silk. Sound changes register by register, the big mountain hush drops a tone. The grass's ocean returns. Somewhere water chatters like a happy clerk. Behind a whistle rises closer than you like. You resist the urge to sprint, letting the pony's breathing settle into a metronome you can survive. You pass a scatter of marmot mounds, you nod respectfully. They decline to answer a tumble of stones that ring faintly when your hooves tap them. You apologize to the ovu that isn't there, and a stand of scrub where tiny birds pretend to be leaves. The world infuriatingly keeps being beautiful while you're busy being hunted. The riders crest the saddle behind you, a glance over your shoulder confirms it. They pause reading the valley the way a reader skims the last page first. Then they come on at a working pace, no drama, just inevitability on 4 legs. The distance is not collapsing, but it is thinking about it. You let the pony out half a breath more, then rein it back, budget not cure. Then, in the near distance, where the valley gentles into a broader bowl, a figure rises onto a low earth hummock and lifts something high. For a second your heart misreads it as a spear. Then the sun threads it and turns it into a ribbon of bright silk white, or near enough snapping once-twice like a handkerchief waved from a train platform. A second figure steps up beside the first and plants a staff with a carved head falcon wolf that you cannot pass at this speed. No weapons pointed, no horns, no whistles, just a signal simple as a word you haven't learned yet. The old man, trotting at your flank as if he merely stepped out for morning air, sees it too. He huffs a sound halfway between relief and resignation, and lifts his chin a measured thumb's height. The archer does not raise his bow. The child waves back before checking themselves and pretending they did not. Trust the valley offers or trap the memory of Bell's replies. Your breath slows to listen to both. The pony's ears swivel forward and then back, the animal's vote recorded as undecided. Behind the riders lengthen their line as if preparing to watch you choose. You ease the canter down to a jog, feel the woman's hands tighten, once then settle. The white silk flares again in the light, less command than invitation. The carved staff's shadow lengthens like a sundial deciding the hour. Somewhere off to your left the little river shows its teeth. Somewhere to your right a lark tries a first uncertain trill, and then bravely keeps singing. You will have to choose in the next 20 heartbeats whether to angle toward the silk and stake your chances on strangers, or veer away and keep gambling on rock and wind. Either way the steppe will remember, and it is listening. The strip of white silk flares again in the valley's newborn light, snapping twice like a flag, half calling, half daring. Behind you hoofbeats drum the saddle closer, harder, more deliberate now. The hunters have seen the same valley you have. They know you cannot linger. The old man stops at your side chest, heaving only lightly despite the climb. He looks from the silk to you, then to the woman you've carried this far, and finally to the child whose blue stick charm wobbles like a banner of its own. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The question is carved into his silence. Will you trust what you don't understand or keep running until running itself betrays you? The archer narrows his eyes at the figures with the staff. He doesn't lower his bow this time, but neither does he raise it. Suspicion is his currency, and he spends it carefully. The pony stamps once impatient, sensing in its animal bones that the choice must be made now, not after 1,000 more hoofbeats. Mainstream fact parley signals on the steppe could be as simple as a white flag or a raised bow. Some chronicles say white silk meant sanctuary, others say it meant surrender. The ambiguity was often deliberate because survival depended not on symbols, but on who held the stronger ground. You know the truth a flag, no matter its colour, is only a suggestion. Quirky tidbit, among some clans, carved staffs with animal heads marked neutral meeting places, falcon for speed, wolf for strength, deer for peace. Children played games around them pretending to be envoys. Adults played games too, but theirs ended less kindly. The staff planted below could be invitation or warning, and both wear the same face. Historians still argue whether fugitives had any chance when caught between patrols and local kin groups. Some sources claim locals shielded strangers bound by hospitality older than empire. Others describe betrayals made quickly, cheaply for the safety of one's own. You're about to test which page of history this valley prefers. You guide the pony down the slope, each step measured. The woman clings tighter, the child runs ahead, bold but trembling with the weight of the blue stick talisman. The old man keeps his pace slow, deliberate, as if the act of walking calmly is itself a defence. The riders behind crest the saddle, now their silhouettes black against the rising sun. Whistles cut the air sharp, urgent. The hunters have seen the white silk too, and now they ride harder hooves, hammering the earth as if to close the book on this chapter before you can turn the page. The figures with the staff stand unmoving. The silk flutters. The carved head leans into the morning breeze, waiting. You have seconds. Do you angle toward the white silk gamble on sanctuary and unknown hands? Or do you veer away, push the pony into one last desperate run, risking exhaustion and certainty of pursuit? The valley holds its breath with you, and whichever choice you make, the steppe will remember. And now, as the story drifts to its quietest shore, you can let go of the chase. The hooves that thundered so insistently in your imagination can soften like waves folding against sand. The whistles fade, the bells fall silent. What lingers is not fear, but the memory of movement, the long journey through darkness, the cautious trust of strangers, the faithful steadiness of a borrowed pony. Picture yourself lying back now, not against cold stone or trembling earth, but against something soft, steady, safe. The grass of the steppe cushions you tall blades, sighing in the gentlest of breezes. Overhead, the endless sky stretches wide, no longer a ceiling of threat, but a canvas for rest. The stars fade as dawn stretches its pale arms across the world, but the warmth of morning doesn't demand action anymore. It simply holds you. Your breathing can slow here, matching the rhythm of the land itself, in like the rise of a hill, out like the drift of a valley. Each exhale carries away the weight of decisions, the tension of escape, until your body feels light again. Even the old man's silence, the archer's sharp eyes, the child's bright stick, the woman's weary determination, they soften into figures who can step back into the mist, their work done, their part played. What remains is calm, stillness, the hush of wide plains that no longer need to be crossed. You can rest in that hush now without fear of pursuit. The steppe has stopped listening, and the world is content to let you drift into sleep.